You've spent your entire life being told you're not enough. Not smart enough, not disciplined enough, not clan-blooded enough. You've watched people cross the street to avoid you as a kid. You've bled for a village that used to look at you like you were a curse wearing a headband. And then, one day, that same village hands you a mask carved like a fox and tells you that from this moment forward, you're in charge of the two people who understand your pain better than anyone alive. That's not a promotion. That's a test with no answer key. And that's exactly the position Naruto Uzumaki found himself in on a gray, overcast morning in Konoha. A morning that started like any other, and ended with the entire shinobi hierarchy of the Hidden Leaf turned on its head. If you're new here, welcome. This is the What If series where we take the story you already know and snap it in a different direction to see what breaks. Today we're asking, what if, instead of chasing the hat, Naruto Uzumaki was handed something the show never gave him, command of his own ANBU squad, with Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno answering to him. Stick with me on this one, because by the end of this chapter, you're going to understand exactly why this decision nearly tore Team 7 apart before their first mission even began. And hey, if you're enjoying these alternate timelines, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button with the notification bell, because this series only gets darker from here. Now, let's rewind to the morning it all started. It was still early when the summons came. Not the usual scroll delivered by a Chunin messenger, but a direct order, sealed, stamped with the Hokage's personal insignia, delivered by an ANBU operative who said nothing and vanished the second the message was in Naruto's hands. That alone should have told him something was different. Missions came through Shizen. Personal audiences with Tsunade came through gossip and grumbling. This was neither. Naruto read the summons twice standing in the doorway of his apartment, his hair still a mess from sleep, and felt something cold slide down the back of his neck that had nothing to do with the morning air. Report to the Hokage's office. 0800. Full squad. 3 words at the bottom made his stomach drop even further. Do not discuss. He didn't know it yet, but across the village, Sakura was staring at an identical scroll with the exact same unease, and a few blocks away, Sasuke was reading his version in silence, already suspicious, already calculating every possible reason the Hokage would summon Team 7 with this kind of secrecy. Because here's the thing about shinobi who've survived a war, you learn to read the temperature of a room before you even walk into it. And every instinct Team 7 had was screaming that this temperature was about to change. By 07:55, all 3 of them stood outside the Hokage's office, none of them speaking, none of them quite meeting each other's eyes. Sakura had her arms crossed over the high collar of her jacket, jaw tight. Sasuke leaned against the wall with the practiced stillness of someone pretending not to be tense. And Naruto just kept glancing at the door like it might answer his questions if he stared hard enough. You two know what this is about? He finally asked. No, Sasuke said. Flat. Final. I have a bad feeling, Sakura admitted, and that, more than anything, made Naruto's shoulders tighten. Sakura's instincts had saved their lives more than once. If she was nervous, he had every right to be. The doors opened before any of them could speculate further. Tsunade's office looked different that morning. Not physically, the same stacks of paperwork, the same window overlooking the village, the same faint smell of green tea steaming untouched on the corner of her desk. What was different was who else was in the room. Kakashi stood off to one side, hands in his pockets, his single visible eye giving away absolutely nothing, which, if you knew Kakashi, was its own kind of warning. Shizen stood near the Hokage's shoulder with a folder pressed to her chest like she was bracing for an argument. And near the back wall, silent and imposing, stood 2 members of the village council, robes immaculate, expressions unreadable. Council members. In a room meant for a genin team's mission briefing, Naruto felt Sakura go rigid beside him. Even Sasuke's mask of indifference cracked, just slightly, his eyes narrowing at the unfamiliar faces. Sit, Tsunade said. And it wasn't really an invitation. None of them sat. Old habits. Tsunade sighed, laced her fingers together on the desk, and looked at the 3 of them with an expression Naruto had rarely seen on her. Not the exhausted irritation of a Hokage buried in paperwork. Not the sharp command of a battlefield leader. This was something closer to weight. Like she was about to hand them something heavy, and wanted to make sure they were braced for it first. Team 7 no longer exists, she said. As of this morning, the silence that followed was the kind that has texture. You could have cut it into pieces and served it on a plate. What? The word came out of Naruto before he could stop it, sharper than he meant. Your genin designation is dissolved, Tsunade continued, unmoved by the outburst. All 3 of you have been reassigned. Effective immediately, you are being inducted into the ANBU Black Ops. Sakura's breath caught audibly. Sasuke didn't move at all, which was somehow louder than if he'd shouted. You're breaking us up, Naruto said, and there was something raw underneath the words, something that had nothing to do with rank or missions and everything to do with the terror of losing the only family structure he'd ever really had. I'm not breaking anything, Tsunade said, and for just a moment, something almost gentle passed behind her eyes. I'm reforging it into something the village needs more right now. The 3 of you have fought in a war most shinobi twice your age never had to face. You've operated under conditions that would break seasoned jonin. It's time your rank reflected that. She let that sit for a second before continuing, and Naruto could feel Kakashi watching him now, carefully, like he was waiting to see how this would land. You'll be assigned as a unit, Tsunade said. Same squad. Same faces. Different mandate. Higher stakes. No genin missions, no chunin exams, no D-rank chores. From this point forward, you answer directly to me, and the work you do won't exist on paper anyone outside this room will ever see. Sakura found her voice first. Under whose command? And there it was. The question that mattered most. Tsunade's gaze slid to Naruto, and held. Yours, she said, looking directly at him now. Naruto Uzumaki. You will serve as squad captain. For a moment, Naruto genuinely thought he'd misheard her. Me? You, Tsunade confirmed. Behind him, he heard Sasuke's shift, not violently, not dramatically, just the smallest adjustment of weight from one foot to the other. But Naruto had known Sasuke long enough to know that small movement was the equivalent of a shout. One of the council members finally spoke, an older man with a voice like dry parchment. This decision was not unanimous, Hokage. No, Tsunade agreed, without looking away from Naruto. It wasn't. But it's mine to make, and I've made it. Let's pause here for a second, because I want you to sit in this moment with Naruto. Because I think it's easy to blow past just how insane this must have felt from the inside. This is a kid, and he was still basically a kid, 17 years old with the emotional scar tissue of someone twice that, who spent his entire childhood being told, implicitly and explicitly, that he wasn't capable of leading anything. Teachers overlooked him. Villagers feared him. Even his own team, in the earliest days, doubted him constantly. And now the most powerful person in the village was standing in front of 2 elders, in front of Kakashi, the man who taught him everything he knew about being a shinobi, and telling him he was going to command not just any squad, but the 2 people whose respect had always felt the hardest to earn. You'd think this would feel like validation. Like an ending to years of being underestimated. It didn't. Not yet. Because Naruto wasn't looking at Tsunade anymore. He was looking at Sasuke. Sasuke's expression hadn't changed much. A slight narrowing of the eyes, a stillness in his jaw. But Naruto had spent years learning to read the smaller signals underneath Sasuke's silence. And what he read now wasn't fury. It was something colder. Calculation. The look of someone already redrawing the entire map of how he understood his place in the world. Sakura, for her part, looked like she was trying to process 3 different emotions at once, and losing the battle to keep her expression neutral. Tsunade continued before anyone could interject, sliding a folder across the desk toward Naruto. Your ANBU designation is Squad Rho, she said. You'll each be issued standard tactical armor, a code name, and a mask. Effective immediately. Your identities within the Corps are classified. Outside this room, you do not discuss squad assignments, mission details, or command structure with anyone, including other shinobi, including family, including each other in public settings. She looked at each of them in turn. This is not genin work anymore. You will be given missions that require you to kill without hesitation, extract intelligence under torture conditions, and make split-second decisions that will cost lives regardless of which way you choose. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you this because I need to know, right now, in this room, Whether the three of you can accept what this actually means. The room went quiet again. Outside the window, Naruto could hear the distant, ordinary sounds of the village waking up, a market cart, a dog barking, someone laughing 2 streets over, life continuing, oblivious to the fact that the 3 shinobi standing in this office were about to become someone the village would never see, doing work the village would never know about. I accept, Sakura said first, her voice steadier than Naruto expected, a beat of silence. Then Sasuke, quieter, sharper, fine. Every eye in the room turned to Naruto. He thought about Jiraiya. He thought about every person who had ever told him he'd amount to nothing. He thought, briefly and painfully, about the years he'd spent dreaming about a hat and an office, not a mask and a shadow. I accept, he said. But I want to know why me. Tsunade almost smiled. Good. That's the first question a captain should ask. She didn't answer it immediately, not with the council still in the room. Instead, she gestured for Shizen to distribute the folders, and for the next several minutes, the briefing shifted into procedure, uniform fittings, mask assignments. The location of the squad row operations room buried 3 levels beneath the tower where regular shinobi never went. Sakura's questions were sharp and practical. Chain of command during medical emergencies, protocol for mission abort calls, how debriefs would be logged. Sasuke asked almost nothing, which Naruto had learned long ago meant he was absorbing everything and filing it away for later. Naruto asked about none of it. He was still turning over Tsunade's unanswered question in his head, and if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering the same thing right now. Out of every jonin, every seasoned operative in the village, why would the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf hand an ANBU command to a shinobi barely out of his teens? We'll get to that. But first, the masks. The armorer's room 3 levels down smelled like leather, oil, and cold steel, a smell that would, from this day forward, become permanently associated in Naruto's memory with the sound of Tsunade's voice telling him his life had just changed forever. 3 masks sat on a table, each carved from pale wood, each painted with the kind of minimalist precision that made them somehow more unsettling than elaborate designs would have been. A fox, sharp-eared and narrow-eyed. A bird, wings swept back like it was mid-flight. A blossom, petals rendered in clean red strokes against white. Naruto picked up the fox mask and felt the weight of it settle into his palm, heavier than it looked, cool against his skin. Fitting, Kakashi said from the doorway, arms crossed, watching. It was the first thing he'd said since the office. You knew about this, Naruto said. Not a question. I recommended you, Kakashi said simply. Naruto's head snapped up. You what? Kakashi pushed off the doorframe and stepped further into the room, glancing briefly at Sasuke and Sakura, who had gone very still, listening. Tsunade asked me who I thought could hold a command like this, Kakashi said. I told her the same thing I believed for years. You don't lead by being the strongest fighter in the room, Naruto. You lead by making people want to follow you even when following you is hard. I watched you do that during the war. I watched you do it when nobody else could get through to Obito, when nobody else could reach Sasuke. A glance toward the Uchiha, who didn't react, when half the allied shinobi forces were ready to give up and you refused to let them. That's not something you can train into a person. Either they have it, or they don't. Sakura's eyes were wet, though she blinked it away quickly, turning her attention to her own mask like it required intense study. Sasuke said nothing at all. But he picked up the raven mask and turned it over in his hands with a care that suggested he was thinking harder about all of this than he wanted anyone to notice. But, Kakashi added, and his tone shifted, sobering, being loved by a village and being obeyed by a squad are 2 very different things, Naruto. People will follow you because they believe in you. That's not the same as trusting your orders when the stakes are life and death. You're going to have to earn that separately. Every single day. Naruto looked down at the fox mask in his hands. I know, he said quietly. And for the first time since walking into Tsunade's office that morning, some of the disbelief in his voice had settled into something steadier. Something closer to resolve. If you want to understand why this arc hits different from a lot of the other what-ifs we've covered on this channel, it's because this isn't really a power fantasy. This is a leadership story, and leadership stories only work if the person in charge has to earn it in front of the people who are hardest to convince. For Naruto, that's not the village. The village already loves him. It's the two people standing next to him in that armorer's room, holding masks of their own, who have spent years watching him stumble, watching him grow, and, in Sasuke's case, at least, watching him with a complicated mixture of respect and rivalry that had never fully resolved itself. So let's talk about the ceremony. Because this is where things start to crack. The formal induction took place in a chamber Naruto hadn't even known existed. A low, stone-walled room beneath the Hokage tower lit by torches instead of the modern lighting used everywhere else. Deliberately old-fashioned, deliberately solemn. Tsunade stood at the front, Shizen beside her, and this time, no council members were present. Just the four of them, and the three masks laid out on a stone table like relics. "Kneel," Tsunade said, and for the first time all day, her voice carried the full weight of her office. They knelt. "Squad Row," she said. "From this day forward, you exist as instruments of Konoha's will, unseen and unnamed. Your loyalty is to the village. Your discretion is absolute. Your captain's word in the field is law." Her eyes moved to Naruto. "Do you accept this burden?" Naruto's throat was tight. He thought about every mission he'd ever wanted to lead, every moment he'd imagined himself standing where Kakashi once stood, giving orders instead of following them. None of those daydreams had prepared him for how heavy this actually felt. "I accept," he said. "Do you accept his command?" Tsunade asked, turning to Sakura. A pause, brief, but Naruto felt it in his chest like a physical thing. "I accept," Sakura said, and her voice didn't waver. Tsunade turned to Sasuke last. The torchlight flickered across his face, and for a moment, nobody in the room breathed. "I accept," Sasuke said finally. 2 words. No hesitation visible on the surface. But Naruto, who had spent years learning to read every flicker of expression Sasuke allowed himself, caught something underneath those 2 words. Not defiance, exactly. Something closer to a promise to himself. "I'll follow him. For now. But I'm watching everything he does." Tsunade nodded, satisfied, and lifted the fox mask from the table with both hands. "Rise, Captain." Naruto stood, and Tsunade placed the mask into his hands herself, not handed it, placed it, deliberately, like she was passing him something that mattered too much for a casual gesture. "Wear it well," she said, quiet enough that it felt like it was meant for him alone. The masks went on. Naruto's world narrowed to the eye slits of the fox, the smell of fresh wooden lacquer, the strange muffled quality his own breathing took on inside it. Beside him, Sakura's blossom mask settled over her features, her ANBU uniform, armored, high-collared, sleeves running the full length of her arms, nothing exposed but her hands and the sharp line of her eyes through the mask, making her look, for a moment, like someone Naruto barely recognized. Sasuke's raven mask completed the transformation, and just like that, Team 7 as Naruto had known it for years, the loud genin, the fierce medic, the broody avenger, ceased to exist. In their place stood Squad Row. "Report to your quarters," Tsunade said. "Your first mission briefing will come within the week. Use the time to adjust to your equipment, run drills, and," her eyes flicked to Naruto specifically, "figure out how you're going to run this squad. Because I promise you, the first mission won't wait for you to have it figured out." Dismissed, they filed out of the chamber in silence, masks in hand rather than on their faces now that the ceremony was over, the torchlight giving way to the ordinary fluorescent hum of the tower's lower corridors. Sakura peeled off first, murmuring something about needing to process everything, disappearing down a side corridor with her blossom mask clutched against her chest. Which left Naruto alone with Sasuke. Naruto felt it before Sasuke said anything, that specific, familiar prickle down his spine that meant Sasuke was about to say something he wasn't going to like. "Walk with me," Sasuke said. Not a question. They walked in silence through the tower's lower halls, out into a side courtyard where the morning had fully broken into afternoon light, the sounds of the village audible again beyond the walls, completely, jarringly normal, considering what the two of them had just become. Sasuke stopped near the courtyard's edge, turning to face him fully for the first time since the office. "You know why I said fine back there," Sasuke said. "Not because I think you've earned this." Naruto's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Then why?" "Because Tsunade made the call, and right now, I don't have a better option," Sasuke said, his voice level, almost clinical. "But I want to be clear about something before we start taking orders that could get one of us killed." He stepped closer, close enough that Naruto could see his own reflection in the dark of Sasuke's eyes. You've never led anything in your life, Naruto. Not really. You've dragged people along with sheer stubbornness, and it's worked because you were lucky, or because I was there to clean up what you started, or because Kakashi bailed you out before it went too far. ANBU isn't going to give you that luxury. The first time you hesitate, the first time your gut instinct is wrong instead of right, someone doesn't come home. Maybe me. Maybe Sakura. Naruto's hands curled into fists at his sides, the fox mask pressed against his ribs. So say it, Naruto said quietly. Whatever you're actually trying to say. Sasuke's eyes narrowed, and for one long, suspended moment, the courtyard felt smaller than it was, the space between them charged with years of rivalry that had never fully burned itself out, not in the Valley of the End, not in the war, not in any of the quiet reconciliations that had followed. Do you actually think you can order me around? Sasuke asked, and the question landed exactly as sharp as he intended it to. Because I'll follow the mask, Naruto. I'll follow Squad Rose Captain because that's what the Hokage demands of me right now. But you and I both know that's not the same thing as following you. 5 days had passed since the induction ceremony, and in that time, Squad Rho had existed mostly as 3 people orbiting each other in careful, deliberate silence. There had been drills, early mornings in the tower's lower training chamber, running through formation exercises that felt stiff and unfamiliar after years of the loose, instinctive rhythm the 3 of them had built as genin. There had been equipment fittings, weapons checks, briefings on ANBU protocol delivered by a stone-faced instructor named Tenzo who Naruto vaguely remembered from the war and who now, apparently, doubled as their liaison to the broader Black Ops division. There had been long stretches of time where nobody spoke much at all, everyone still adjusting to the strange new shape of their partnership. And through all of it, Naruto had been trying, quietly, without announcing it, without making a big show of the effort the way the old Naruto might have, to figure out what kind of captain he actually wanted to be. He'd thought about asking Kakashi for advice outright. Had gotten as far as standing outside his old sensei's door twice before turning around both times. Because here's the thing, and if you've ever been handed a responsibility you didn't feel ready for, you'll understand this. Asking for help felt like admitting the doubts Sasuke had voiced out loud in that courtyard. And Naruto wasn't ready to confirm that doubt. Not yet. Not before he'd even had a real mission to prove it wrong. So instead, he'd done what he always did when he didn't know the answer to something. He watched. He paid attention. He noticed the way Sakura organized her medical kit with obsessive precision before every drill, the way Sasuke ran the same formation exercise 4 times in a row until his footwork was flawless, the way both of them, in their own ways, were bracing for him to fail. He decided, somewhere around day 3, that the only way to answer Sasuke's question was to stop trying to sound like a captain and start actually being one. Whatever that meant. He was still figuring it out. On the morning of day 6, the summons came. The mission briefing took place in a smaller room than the one where they'd first learned of their reassignment. No council members this time, no ceremony, just Tsunade behind a desk covered in maps, Shizen beside her, and a 4th figure Naruto didn't recognize, a middle-aged man in traveling robes, road-worn but clearly of some standing, introduced simply as Minister Doran, an envoy from a smaller allied territory along the eastern border. Minister Doran is traveling to Konoha to finalize a trade agreement that's been under negotiation for the better part of a year, Tsunade said without preamble, gesturing at the map spread across her desk. Standard diplomatic protocol would have him escorted by a regular Jonin detail. That's not what's happening here. Why not? Sakura asked, arms crossed, studying the map with the same intensity she'd once reserved for medical texts. Because 3 weeks ago, an attempt was made on the minister's life, Tsunade said, and my sources tell me it wasn't opportunistic. It was targeted. Someone doesn't want this trade agreement signed, and they were willing to kill to stop it. Minister Doran, who had remained silent until this point, cleared his throat. He was a soft-spoken man, Naruto noted, with a kind of careful, measured way of speaking that suggested decades of political maneuvering. The agreement would open trade routes that currently benefit certain, less scrupulous, merchant factions operating in the border region. Smugglers, primarily. Groups who profit from the lack of formal oversight. My death would delay the agreement indefinitely, possibly kill it outright. So this isn't a diplomat escort, Naruto said slowly, understanding settling over him. This is a protection detail against people who already tried to kill him once. Exactly, Tsunade said. And that's why it's going to you instead of a standard Jonin squad. I want this handled with discretion, precision, and if it comes to it, lethal force applied without hesitation. This is Squad Row's first live mission. Consider it a proving ground. She looked at Naruto specifically as she said the last part, and he felt the weight of it settle into his chest. The route runs through contested territory for roughly 2 days, Tsunade continued, tracing a line on the map with one finger. Border checkpoints are unreliable out there, more decorative than functional. You'll be exposed for most of the journey. I'm not going to pretend this is low risk. It isn't. But it's also not the kind of mission that should require your full lethal capacity if you handle it correctly. And if we don't handle it correctly? Sasuke asked. It wasn't really a question. It was a challenge, aimed less at Tsunade and more, Naruto suspected, at him. Tsunade's eyes flicked between the two of them, and something in her expression suggested she'd already picked up on the tension neither of them was bothering to hide particularly well. Then Minister Doran dies, the trade agreement collapses, and I have to explain to the council why my first ANBU assignment under new leadership fell apart in the field, she said flatly. So I'd recommend you don't let that happen. They departed within the hour. No time wasted, no elaborate send-off. Just 3 masked operatives and a nervous minister slipping out through a side gate of the village before the sun had fully cleared the horizon. Traveling as ANBU was different from traveling as genin, and Naruto felt that difference almost immediately. There was no idle chatter, no complaining about pace or terrain, no easy camaraderie disguised as bickering. Sasuke moved through the trees ahead, scouting the route with the kind of silent efficiency that made him nearly invisible even to Naruto's trained eye. Sakura stayed close to the minister, her posture alert, hands never far from the pouch of medical supplies at her hip, the full-length sleeves of her uniform giving her an almost severe, professional bearing that Naruto found himself struck by more than once. This wasn't the girl who used to shout at him for being late. This was someone else. Someone the mission had already started to reshape. And Naruto walked at the rear, watching all of it, trying to figure out where, exactly, a captain was supposed to stand. He caught up to Sasuke around midday, when the trees had thickened into the kind of dense forest that made visibility a genuine tactical concern. What's your read on the terrain? Naruto asked, keeping his voice low. Sasuke didn't slow his pace. Bad. Too much cover, not enough sidelines. If someone wanted to hit us before the border, this is where they'd do it. Then we adjust formation, Naruto said. Tighten up around the minister, keep Sakura closer to the center instead of trailing him. Sasuke glanced sideways at him, the first real look he'd given Naruto since they'd left the village. That's not a bad call. It wasn't praise, exactly. But it wasn't nothing either. They adjusted the formation. Naruto gave the order, clear, direct, no hesitation in his voice even though his stomach was doing something complicated underneath, and Sakura fell back without question, tightening the perimeter around Minister Doran, who seemed grateful for the increased proximity even if he didn't fully understand the tactical reasoning behind it. For a while, things settled into something that almost resembled rhythm. They made camp that evening in a shallow gully off the main trail, sheltered enough to avoid easy detection but close enough to the route that they wouldn't lose time backtracking in the morning. Sasuke handled the perimeter, laying a rough network of trip wires and chakra-sensitive markers around the camp's edges while Sakura tended to Minister Doran, who'd developed a minor blister from the day's unfamiliar pace and was fussing about it with the particular embarrassment of a man used to traveling in carriages rather than on foot. Naruto built the fire, small, low, carefully shielded from view, and set a kettle to boil, the smell of tea leaves and wood smoke settling over the little camp as the light faded from the sky. You don't have to do that, Minister Doran said, watching Naruto pour a cup and hand it to him. I imagine ANBU captains have more important things to attend to than tea service. ANBU captains still have to eat, Naruto said, offering something that was almost a grin. Figured it might as well be warm. The minister accepted the cup with both hands, wrapping his fingers around it gratefully against the evening chill. You're younger than I expected. When they told me the Hokage was assigning her most trusted squad, I confess I pictured someone a bit more seasoned. Yeah, Naruto said, something flickering behind his eyes that he didn't quite manage to hide. I get that a lot. Across the fire, Sasuke returned from setting the perimeter, folding himself down onto a fallen log with the kind of economical movement that wasted nothing. Sakura joined a moment later, having finished bandaging Doran's blister, and for a while, the four of them sat in the strange, quiet intimacy of a shared fire in unfamiliar territory. How long have the three of you worked together? Doran asked, glancing between them, apparently trying to fill the silence with something other than his own nerves. Years, Sakura said. Since we were genin. And now you're captain, Doran said, looking at Naruto with mild curiosity. That must have been quite a transition. Leading people you used to serve alongside as equals. The question landed harder than Doran probably intended it to. Naruto felt Sasuke's attention sharpen from across the fire, though his expression didn't change. It's an adjustment, Naruto said carefully. For everyone, I'd imagine, Doran said, oblivious to the tension he was needling, or perhaps not so oblivious after all. Politicians, Naruto was learning, had a talent for finding the exact pressure points in a room without seeming to try. Sasuke's voice cut through the moment, quiet and even. It's fine. He's earning it. It wasn't a warm statement. It wasn't an endorsement. But it was, Naruto realized with something like surprise, the first time Sasuke had said anything even remotely close to supportive since the induction ceremony, and it landed with more weight than Naruto expected, settling into his chest like a small, unexpected gift. He didn't say anything in response. Just nodded once, and let the fire crackle in the silence that followed. Here's where I want to slow down for a second, because I think it's easy to miss how much is happening underneath the surface of a scene like this. On paper, it's just four people drinking tea around a campfire. But underneath that, you've got a boy who spent his entire life being told he wasn't capable of leadership, sitting across from the one person whose approval has always mattered most to him, getting the smallest possible crumb of validation. He's earning it, and having to fight not to let it show on his face how much that single sentence means to him. That's the emotional core of this arc. Not the missions. Not the action. The slow, grinding work of earning trust from people who have every reason to withhold it. But don't get comfortable. Because the peaceful part of this chapter is about to end. They broke camp before dawn, moving quickly through the last stretch of forest before the terrain opened into the wider, more exposed border regions Tsunade had flagged as the highest risk section of the route. Sasuke took point again, Sakura and the minister in the center, Naruto rotating between rear guard and flank, trying to maintain the kind of fluid, adaptive positioning that felt right even though no training manual had explicitly taught it to him. It was mid-morning when Sasuke's hand shot up, a sharp, silent signal that froze the entire squad in place. Naruto was at his side in seconds, chakra already gathering at his fingertips, eyes scanning the tree-lean Sasuke was staring at with the kind of stillness that meant he'd seen something real. Movement, Sasuke breathed, barely audible. 3, maybe 4. East Ridge. Hostile? Naruto asked. Position like it, Sasuke said. They're not on the road. They're waiting for us to be on it. Naruto's mind raced. An ambush position on high ground, overlooking the exposed stretch of trail they need to cross to continue toward the border. Exactly the kind of terrain feature Tsunade had warned them about. And exactly the kind of decision point Sasuke had thrown at him back in that courtyard, wrapped in a question about whether Naruto could actually lead when it mattered. Well, here it was. Mattering. Sakura, Naruto said, voice low but carrying the flat, immediate authority of command. Get the minister off the trail, into cover, now. Don't engage unless they get past us. Sakura didn't hesitate. She had Doran moving before Naruto had even finished the sentence, guiding him with a firm hand toward a cluster of boulders off the main path, her body angled protectively between the minister and the ridge Sasuke had flagged. Sasuke, with me, Naruto said. We flank the ridge before they commit. If we wait for them to move first, we're fighting on their terms. Sasuke's eyes flicked toward him, a fraction of a second of hesitation, the kind of pause that Naruto recognized immediately as this isn't what I would have chosen. But he didn't argue. He nodded once, and the two of them broke from the trail together, moving low and fast through the underbrush toward the ridge. They hit the ambush position from an angle nobody was expecting, not from the trail below, where the attackers had clearly anticipated their targets would be exposed and vulnerable, but from the flank, cutting the distance in seconds with the kind of coordinated speed that came from years of fighting side by side even if the command structure between them was brand new. There were 4 of them, as Sasuke had guessed, rough-looking mercenaries in unmarked gear, clearly hired muscle rather than trained shinobi, but armed and clearly briefed on exactly who they were meant to kill. The element of surprise did most of the work. Sasuke took the first 2 down almost before they'd registered the attack was coming from the wrong direction, his movements precise and economical, no wasted motion, no unnecessary force, just controlled, efficient neutralization. Naruto engaged the other 2 head-on, and here's where the difference in their styles became impossible to ignore. Where Sasuke fought like a blade, clean lines, minimal exposure, textbook precision, Naruto fought like weather, fast, adaptive, willing to take a hit to close distance, reading his opponent's intentions half a second before they committed and adjusting in real time. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't the kind of fighting that would look good in a training manual, but it worked. Both mercenaries were down within seconds, disarmed and immobilized rather than killed, a distinction Naruto made instinctively, even in the heat of the moment, because these were hired hands, not the true architects of the attempt on Doran's life, and there was intelligence value in a live prisoner that a corpse simply couldn't provide. Sasuke noticed. Of course he noticed. You could have killed them faster, Sasuke said, breathing evenly despite the exertion, surveying the 4 incapacitated attackers scattered across the ridge. I know, Naruto said. But dead men don't tell us who hired them. For a moment, Sasuke just looked at him, really looked, in a way that felt different from every other look he'd given Naruto since the induction ceremony. Not evaluation. Not skepticism. Something closer to recalculation, like a piece of a puzzle had just shifted into a configuration Sasuke hadn't previously considered. That's a captain's call, Sasuke said finally. Quiet. Almost begrudging. Yeah, Naruto said, allowing himself the smallest exhale of relief now that the fight was over. It is. They interrogated the lead mercenary briefly, enough to confirm what Tsunade had already suspected, that they'd been hired by an intermediary connected to the smuggling factions who stood to lose the most from Doran's trade agreement, though the trail of who exactly had ordered the hit went cold at a name none of them recognized. It was enough for now, enough to report back, enough to justify the mission's risk classification, enough to prove that the threat against the minister had been exactly as real as Tsunade warned. They bound the mercenaries and left them for a border patrol checkpoint to collect, continuing on toward the crossing with Minister Doran considerably paler than he'd been that morning but otherwise unharmed, thanks in no small part to Sakura's quick positioning and the speed with which Naruto and Sasuke had neutralized the threat before it ever reached the trail. It should have felt like a victory. In a lot of ways it was Squad Row's first live mission, first real test under fire, executed cleanly with no casualties on their side and the mission objective fully intact. Naruto found himself replaying the moment on the ridge more than once as they continued toward the border, that brief exchange with Sasuke settling into his chest like something he wanted to hold onto. But, and if you've been paying attention to the undercurrent running through this whole chapter, you probably saw this coming. Victories in this series rarely come without a cost, even the quiet ones. The final stretch to the border crossing passed without incident, and by the time they handed Minister Doran off to the waiting escort that would see him the rest of the way into Konoha for the formal signing ceremony, the sun had begun its long slide toward evening. Doran shook each of their hands in turn, a formal, grateful gesture that felt almost strange after the intensity of the ambush hours earlier, and thanked Naruto specifically, in a quiet aside, for the restraint he'd shown with the captured mercenaries. A lot of captains would have simply eliminated the threat, Doran said. The fact that you thought beyond the immediate danger, toward the larger picture, that says something about how you'll lead, Captain Uzumaki. Naruto didn't have a response for that beyond a nod and a tired half-smile, but the word stuck with him on the walk back toward Konoha, turning over in his mind alongside Sasuke's quiet admission on the ridge. Maybe this was possible. Maybe the doubt in that courtyard didn't have to be the whole story. He should have known better than to let himself feel that settled so soon. The debrief that evening, back in Tsunade's office, started well enough. Naruto gave a clean, thorough report: the ambush, the tactical decision to take the ridge instead of waiting for the attack to come to them, the choice to capture rather than kill, the intelligence gathered from the interrogation. Tsunade listened without interrupting, occasionally exchanging a glance with Kakashi, who stood near the window with his usual unreadable expression, arms crossed, taking in every word. Solid work, Tsunade said when Naruto finished. Mission objective secured, minimal collateral, actionable intelligence recovered. I'd call that a successful first outing. Thank you, Hokage, Naruto said, and he meant it, the relief of the assessment loosening something tight in his shoulders that he hadn't fully realized was there. But Sakura, standing slightly behind him, shifted in a way that caught Kakashi's attention immediately. Something to add, Sakura? Kakashi asked, and though his tone was mild, there was an edge of genuine inquiry underneath it. The kind of question a good teacher asks when he already suspects there's more to the story than the official report contains. Sakura hesitated, glancing briefly at Naruto, then at Sasuke, who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the entire debrief, arms crossed, gaze fixed somewhere on the middle distance. The mission was successful, Sakura said carefully. But the squad isn't fully aligned yet. There's still friction in how decisions get made under pressure. Naruto felt his stomach drop slightly, though he kept his expression neutral. Beside him, Sasuke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Elaborate, Tsunade said, leaning forward. Captain Uzumaki's calls were sound, Sakura said, and Naruto noted, with some relief, that there was no hesitation in her endorsement of that much, at least. But there's still a gap between him giving an order and the rest of us fully trusting it in the moment it matters. On the ridge, there was a half-second delay before Sasuke committed to the flanking maneuver. In a different scenario, against a more competent enemy, that half-second could have gotten someone killed. The room went quiet. Naruto felt heat rise in his face, not embarrassment, exactly, but something close to it. The particular sting of having a flaw named out loud in front of the people whose respect he was still trying to earn. Sasuke, for his part, didn't deny it. Didn't defend himself, either. Just stood there, silent, letting the assessment hang in the air. That's not a failure, Kakashi said finally, breaking the silence, his gaze steady on Naruto. That's exactly the kind of thing that gets sorted out through repetition. No squad trusts a new command structure after one mission. But I want you to hear what Sakura's telling you, Naruto, because it's important. It's not enough for your calls to be right. The squad has to believe they're right, in real time, before the outcome proves it. That trust doesn't come from being correct. It comes from consistency, from them watching you make the hard call, again and again, until following your order stops feeling like a risk and starts feeling like instinct. Naruto nodded slowly, absorbing that, filing it away next to everything else he'd learned in the last 6 days. Understood, he said. Tsunade studied him for a long moment, something assessing in her expression. You'll have plenty of opportunities to close that gap. This won't be your last mission, and it certainly won't be your hardest. Dismissed, all 3 of you. Get some rest. You've earned it. They left the tower together, the 3 of them, walking through streets that had gone quiet with evening, the ordinary hum of village life a strange contrast to the tension that had followed them out of the debrief. Sakura peeled off toward her apartment first, offering Naruto a small, apologetic look before she left, an unspoken acknowledgement that she hadn't enjoyed being the one to voice the crack in the squad's foundation, even though she'd known it needed saying, which left Naruto and Sasuke, walking in silence, the same way they'd walked out of the tower 6 days earlier after the induction ceremony. She's not wrong, Sasuke said eventually, breaking the quiet. I know, Naruto said. That half-second, Sasuke continued, wasn't about the tactics. Your call was good. He paused, searching for the words with a precision that suggested he didn't often have to reach this far for honesty. I've spent years assuming I'd have to compensate for your mistakes. It's going to take longer than one mission to stop expecting that. It wasn't cruel. If anything, it was the most honest thing Sasuke had said to him since the induction ceremony, an admission, buried under the clinical delivery, that some part of Sasuke's hesitation wasn't really about Naruto's competence at all. It was about years of accumulated habit, the deep grooves worn into their dynamic by a decade of history that didn't just dissolve because Tsunade handed out a title and a mask. I'm not asking you to trust me blind, Naruto said. I just need you to trust the process. Give me the room to prove it mission by mission. Sasuke was quiet for a long moment, studying him in the dim evening light with an expression Naruto couldn't quite read. Fine, he said finally. One mission at a time. It wasn't everything. It wasn't the kind of resolution that tied things up neatly. But it was something, a foundation, however thin, that Naruto could build on. He just didn't know yet how quickly that foundation was about to be tested again. 10 days after the border mission, Squad Rho found itself back in the underground training chamber beneath the Hokage Tower, running drills that Tenzo, their ANBU liaison, a man who had the unfortunate talent of making every sentence sound like a formal reprimand, had designed specifically to address the coordination deficiencies flagged in their last debrief. Naruto hated that phrase. Coordination deficiencies. Like the half-second of hesitation on that ridge was a mechanical flaw instead of exactly what it was, Sasuke's decade of doubt refusing to dissolve just because a title had changed hands. Again Tenzo said, arms crossed, watching from the observation platform above the training floor. This time, Captain, call the formation shift without warning. I want to see how fast the squad adjusts to an order they haven't rehearsed. Naruto nodded, rolling his shoulders, trying to shake off the tightness that had settled there over the last week and a half. Beside him, Sakura and Sasuke took their starting positions, a simple perimeter formation around a stand-in target meant to simulate a protected asset, the kind of setup they'd run a dozen times already that morning. Positions, Naruto called. They moved. Fluid, practiced, the muscle memory of years together as a team asserting itself even under the unfamiliar new structure. Sasuke took the forward flank, Sakura the rear guard, the formation tightening around the target with the kind of clean efficiency that would have looked, to an outside observer, like a squad operating in perfect sync. Shift, Naruto called suddenly. Sasuke rear. Sakura, forward flank. Now, it should have been simple. A basic reconfiguration, the kind of adjustment real missions demanded constantly, no advance warning, no time to think it through, just react. Sasuke hesitated. Not long. A fraction of a second, the same fraction Sakura had flagged in the debrief after the border mission. But Naruto felt it like a physical thing, that half-beat of delay before Sasuke's feet finally carried him toward the rear position, and something in his chest went tight and hot with a frustration he hadn't fully let himself feel until right now, standing in this training chamber, watching the same flaw repeat itself in a controlled environment where there was no excuse for it. Again, Tenzo called from above, apparently unbothered, jotting something down on the clipboard he carried everywhere. Reset formation. They reset. Naruto called the shift again. The same hesitation. Smaller this time, but there. By the fourth repetition, Naruto's patience had worn thin enough that he heard his own voice come out sharper than he intended. Sasuke. You're half a second behind every single time. What's the problem? Sasuke straightened from his position, and even through the raven mask. They were drilling in full gear today, Tenzo's insistence. Naruto could feel the weight of his stare. There's no problem, Sasuke said, voice level. I'm executing the order. A half-second late, Naruto said. In the field, that's the difference between a clean formation shift and someone getting exposed. I'm aware of the stakes, Sasuke said, and now there was an edge creeping into his voice, subtle but unmistakable. Maybe if the orders came with better setup, I wouldn't need the half-second. The orders aren't going to come with setup in the field, Naruto shot back. That's the entire point of the drill. Above them, Tenzo had stopped riding, watching the exchange with the careful, neutral attention of someone who'd seen plenty of squads fracture under exactly this kind of pressure, and knew better than to interrupt it prematurely. Sakura, standing off to the side, glanced between the two of them with an expression that was rapidly sliding from patient to alarmed. Then maybe the captain should consider, Sasuke said, each word measured and deliberate in a way that made them land harder than if he'd shouted, that giving an order and giving a good order aren't the same thing. You changed the formation without accounting for the fact that Sakura's position requires more repositioning distance than mine. If we were actually protecting someone right now, that shift would have left a 3-second gap in coverage on her side. Naruto opened his mouth to argue and then stopped, because, and this was the worst part, the part that made his frustration curdle into something closer to embarrassment, Sasuke was right. He'd called the shift focused entirely on closing the gap in his own timing without actually running the tactical math on how the repositioning would affect Sakura's coverage. He hated that Sasuke was right. He hated it more than he could easily admit. Standing there in a fox mask that was supposed to represent authority he was very publicly failing to fully claim. Fine, Naruto said, jaw tight. Then tell me instead of standing there letting me walk into it. I'm not your advisor, Sasuke said, and there it was, the real thing underneath all of it, finally surfacing. You're the captain. You're supposed to see it before I have to point it out. The room went very quiet. If you've been watching this series for a while, you know Sasuke doesn't raise his voice often. That's not really his style. His cruelty, when it surfaces, tends to run cold and precise rather than hot and loud. But there was something in the flatness of that last sentence that cut sharper than shouting would have, and Naruto felt it land exactly where Sasuke intended it to. You're supposed to see it before I have to point it out. Because underneath the tactical critique, underneath the training floor specifics about repositioning distances and coverage gaps, that was the real accusation. You're not ready for this. I don't think you're ready for this, and I don't know how much longer I can pretend otherwise. Okay, Naruto said, and his voice had gone very quiet, very still, the kind of stillness that, if Sakura had known him a little less well, she might have mistaken for calm. You want to talk about what I'm supposed to see? Let's talk about it. Take off the mask. Sasuke's hand didn't move toward the raven mask. We're mid-drill. We're done with the drill, Naruto said. Take it off. For a moment, it looked like Sasuke might refuse just to prove a point. But then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and pulled the mask free, revealing an expression that was harder and more guarded than Naruto had seen from him in months. Not since before the war's end, maybe. Not since the last time the two of them had stood across from each other with something unresolved crackling in the air between them. Naruto pulled his own mask off a second later, unwilling to hide behind it while demanding Sasuke not do the same. You've been doing this since day one, Naruto said. The delay, the pushback, the little corrections you make sure everyone hears. If you don't think I can do this, just say it. Stop making me guess. I don't think you've proven you can do this, Sasuke said. That's different from thinking you can't. Feels the same from where I'm standing. That's your problem, not mine. Sakura's voice cut through before either of them could escalate further. Okay. Both of you stop. They both turned toward her, genuinely surprised, for a moment, at the sharpness in her tone. The same sharpness that used to precede her fist connecting with something considerably harder than a training dummy back when they were genin. I mean it, she said, stepping fully between them now, arms crossed, eyes flicking between Naruto and Sasuke with an exhausted kind of fury that had clearly been building for longer than either of them had noticed. I have spent the last 10 days watching the two of you circle each other like this is still the academy. Like Sasuke's going to storm off to Orochimaru again if he doesn't get his way, and Naruto's going to spend 6 months chasing him down to prove a point. We are not 12 years old anymore. We are ANBU. People are going to die if we can't fix this, and I am so tired of being the only one in this squad who seems to understand that. Neither of them said anything. Even Tenzo, up on the observation platform, had gone very still, apparently deciding this was not the moment to intervene with tactical notes. Sasuke, Sakura continued, turning fully toward him now, you have spent 10 days testing him. I get it. I understand why. You've spent years watching Naruto make reckless calls and somehow survive them through sheer stubborn luck, and it terrifies you that the squad's survival is riding on that same stubbornness now that he's in charge. But testing him in a training room where the stakes are theoretical isn't the same as trusting him when the stakes are real, and you know that. So either commit to actually trusting the chain of command, or tell Tsunade you can't, and let her reassign you before that hesitation gets someone killed in the field. Because I watched that half-second happen on the ridge during the border mission too, and I am not interested in finding out what happens the next time it's not a training exercise. Sasuke's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Didn't defend himself, the way he might have a year ago, a lifetime ago. Just stood there, absorbing it, something working behind his eyes that Naruto couldn't quite read. Sakura turned to Naruto next, and if he'd expected any gentler treatment, he was about to be disappointed. And you, she said? You need to stop needing him to say the words out loud before you believe you're doing this right. I have watched you make good calls, genuinely good, sound tactical decisions, and then immediately start second-guessing them the second Sasuke's face does something you don't like. You are the captain. That doesn't mean you get to be perfect. It means you get to be decisive, and trust your own judgment enough that one skeptical look from your teammate doesn't unravel everything you just built. If you need his approval to feel legitimate in that mask, you're going to fall apart the first time a mission goes sideways and there's no time to check whether he's on board. The silence that followed felt different from the tense, brittle silence of a few minutes earlier. This one had weight to it. The particular weight of two people being told an uncomfortable truth by someone who loved them both enough to say it without softening the edges. She's not wrong, Sasuke said finally, quietly, looking at Naruto rather than Sakura. I know, Naruto said. And this time, when he said it, something in his voice had shifted, less defensive, more tired, more honest. I know she's not. Here's the thing about this scene that I think matters more than the argument itself. It would have been easy, too easy, to write this as Naruto being right and Sasuke being wrong, or the other way around. But that's not actually what's happening here. Sasuke's skepticism isn't cruelty. It's fear, dressed up in tactical critique, because the last time Sasuke put his full trust in someone's judgment without reservation, it cost him nearly everything. And Naruto's need for Sasuke's approval isn't weakness, exactly. It's the same thing that's driven him his entire life. The belief that if he can just prove himself to the people who doubt him hardest, everything else falls into place. Sakura's the only one in that room seeing the situation clearly, because she's the only one not caught up in a decade of rivalry clouding the actual, practical stakes in front of them. And she's right that those stakes are about to get a lot more real. Tenzo descended from the observation platform, clearing his throat in a way that suggested he'd been waiting for an appropriate break in the tension to interrupt. For what it's worth, he said, that exchange was more useful than the entire drill. Squads that never fight it out in training tend to fight it out in the field instead, and the field is a considerably worse place to discover you don't trust your captain's judgment. Naruto shot him a look. Was that supposed to be encouraging? It was supposed to be honest, Tenzo said unbothered. Take 15 minutes. Get water. When you come back, we'll... He didn't finish the sentence, because at that exact moment, the chamber's side door opened, and Shizen stepped through, her expression carrying the specific, controlled urgency that meant something had gone wrong somewhere in the village's chain of information. The kind of urgency that always, in Naruto's experience, preceded a mission nobody wanted. Squad row, she said. Hokage's office. Now. All three of you. Tsunade's office had a different atmosphere than it had during their induction briefing. No council members this time, no ceremony, just Tsunade standing rather than sitting. A map spread across her desk with markings that made Naruto's stomach tighten the moment he saw them, and Kakashi already present, arms crossed, his expression grimmer than Naruto had seen it in months. 20 minutes ago, Tsunade said without preamble, we received a coded distress signal from one of our intelligence operatives embedded near the eastern border, the same region Minister Doran's escort mission passed through 10 days ago. Naruto felt the pieces click together before she even finished the sentence. The smuggling faction behind the assassination attempt, Sakura said. That's our working theory, Tsunade confirmed. Our operative has been tracking their movements for months, feeding us intelligence on their supply lines. The distress signal suggests she's been compromised, possibly captured, possibly worse. We don't know yet, and that's exactly the problem. She traced a finger along the map, indicating a settlement nestled near the border, close enough to the region Squad Row had already passed through that Naruto could feel the strange, uncomfortable sense of a story circling back on itself. This isn't a rescue mission in the traditional sense, Tsunade continued. It's an infiltration. If our operative has been captured, extraction is priority one, but I need you to understand the broader stakes here. This settlement isn't just harboring a smuggling operation anymore. Our intelligence suggests it's become a staging ground for something larger. Organized. Coordinated across multiple factions that don't normally work together. Define larger, Sasuke said, his voice carrying none of the tension from the training room now, fully shifted into the flat, focused register Naruto recognized as Sasuke's mission mindset. I don't know yet, Tsunade admitted, and there was something almost unsettling about hearing her say it so plainly. That's what makes this dangerous. We've had fragments of intelligence for weeks pointing towards some kind of larger organizational structure operating out of that region. Enough resources, enough coordination, to hire mercenaries capable of targeting a foreign minister with real planning behind it. Whatever this is, it's bigger than a smuggling ring skimming profits off unregulated trade routes. Kakashi spoke for the first time since Naruto and the others had entered the room. This is exactly the kind of mission ANBU exists for. Deep infiltration, uncertain intelligence, high probability of contact with a force whose full capabilities we don't understand. It's also exactly the kind of mission that tests everything a squad's built in training, because there won't be time to hesitate, and there won't be a controlled environment to fall back on. His eye moved to Naruto, and though his tone remained even, there was something pointed underneath the words, an acknowledgement, Naruto suspected, of exactly what Shizen must have reported hearing on her way to fetch them, or perhaps just Kakashi's long-practiced ability to read a room the second he walked into it. You'll depart within the hour, Tsunade said. I want the full infiltration plan before you go. Entry point, extraction route, contingencies if the operative's already been moved or killed. This is not a mission where you improvise on arrival. Am I clear? Yes, Hokage, Naruto said, and beside him, he felt Sasuke and Sakura straighten in unconscious unison, the argument in the training room already receding beneath the weight of what was coming. Tsunade held Naruto's gaze for a long moment before she spoke again, her voice dropping slightly, quieter, meant for him more than the full room. Captain, she said, I need to know you three can do this together? Not eventually. Now, because if there's a crack in this squad's trust, an operation like this will find it and exploit it before you even realize it's happening. Naruto thought about the training room. About Sasuke's flat, cutting you're supposed to see it before I have to point it out. About Sakura's exhausted, furious honesty cutting through both of their pride in a single unbroken breath. We can do this, Naruto said, and he meant it, not because the tension had magically resolved itself in the last 20 minutes, but because he'd learned, over the last 10 days, that the tension didn't have to be resolved for the squad to function. It just had to be managed, acknowledged, worked around rather than pretended away. Tsunade studied him for a moment longer, then nodded, apparently satisfied, or at least satisfied enough to proceed. Then get your gear, she said. And Naruto. He paused at the door, glancing back. Whatever's waiting in that settlement, she said, it's bigger than a border skirmish. Trust your instincts. But don't let your instincts talk you out of caution. That's the balance that gets captains, and their squads, killed. They geared up in near silence, the training room argument still hanging unresolved in the air between them, though something had shifted in its aftermath. Not resolved, exactly, but acknowledged, which Naruto was slowly learning might be the only version of resolution available to people like him and Sasuke, people who'd never been particularly good at saying the soft version of anything out loud. Sakura checked her medical kit with the same obsessive precision Naruto had noticed on the border mission, restocking supplies, double-checking seals on vials that needed to stay sealed. Sasuke ran a final check on his weapons in silence, the raven mask sitting on the bench beside him, waiting. Naruto found himself standing near the armory window, looking out at the village below, ordinary, unaware, the ordinary rhythm of Konoha's afternoon continuing exactly as it had every day of his life, oblivious to the massed shadowwork that three of its shinobi were about to disappear into. You good? Sakura asked, appearing at his shoulder. Yeah, Naruto said. Then, more honestly, not really. But it doesn't matter right now. It matters, Sakura said. It just doesn't get to stop you. He glanced at her, something almost like a real smile tugging at the corner of his mouth despite everything. When'd you get so wise? Around the fourth time I had to physically stand between you and Sasuke, she said, deadpan, and it was enough to pull an actual laugh out of him, short, surprised, but real. Across the room, Sasuke finished his final check and rose, mask in hand, expression settling back into the controlled neutrality he wore like a second skin before a mission. Formation once we're across the border? He asked, and there was something different in the question, not a challenge this time, not a test. An actual, genuine request for the captain's plan. Naruto felt something ease in his chest at the shift, small as it was. Standard infiltration spacing, he said. You take point on approach, I'll handle contact if we're spotted, Sakura holds rear with extraction supplies ready. We adjust once we've got eyes on the settlement, and know what we're actually dealing with. Sasuke nodded, no hesitation this time, and pulled the raven mask into place. Understood, Captain? Captain? Not sarcastic. Not pointed. Just the word offered plainly, like it belonged to Naruto now in a way it hadn't fully belonged to him even an hour earlier. It wasn't everything. Naruto knew better by now than to mistake one moment of alignment for the whole war being won. But it was something to hold on to as they moved out of the tower and toward the village gates, 3 masked shadows slipping into the gathering evening, heading back toward the same stretch of border territory that had already tested them once, except this time, whatever waited for them in that settlement was going to demand a great deal more than a half-second of hesitation could survive. They crossed the border as the last light faded from the sky, moving fast and low through terrain that had grown steadily more unfamiliar with every mile. Dense scrubland giving way to a cluster of ramshackle buildings on the horizon, lights flickering faintly in a handful of windows, the settlement Tsunade had marked on her map finally visible in the deepening dark. Sasuke raised a hand, signaling a halt at the tree line's edge, and the 3 of them crouched low, studying the layout in silence. It looked, on the surface, like nothing more than a small, unremarkable border town, the kind of place that existed in the margins between larger territories, home to smugglers and merchants and people who preferred the specific kind of anonymity that came with living somewhere nobody official paid much attention to. But Naruto had learned enough, over the last 10 days, to trust the instinct that was already prickling at the back of his neck, the same instinct that had flagged the ambush position on the ridge before Sasuke's confirmation came through. Something about this settlement felt wrong. Too quiet in some places, too watchful in others, the kind of stillness that came from a place actively trying not to draw attention to itself, rather than a place that simply had none to draw. Ready? Naruto breathed, glancing between his teammates, Sakura's blossom mask steady and alert beside him, Sasuke's raven mask already angled toward the settlement's outer edge, scanning for the entry point they'd mapped out during the flight briefing. Ready, Sakura confirmed. Sasuke didn't answer with words. Just a single, sharp nod, and then he was moving, slipping from the treeline into the gathering dark with the kind of silent precision that made him nearly impossible to track even for Naruto's trained eye. And that's exactly the moment, as Squad Rose slipped past the settlement's outer perimeter, moving deeper into territory that Tsunade herself had admitted they didn't fully understand, that a low, distant tremor rolled through the ground beneath their feet. Not an earthquake, an explosion. Somewhere near the settlement's center. Followed, a half-second later, by the unmistakable sound of a chakra alarm siren splitting the night air, and the sudden, chaotic eruption of shouting voices and running feet from every direction at once. Whatever Squad Row had walked into, it was already coming apart at the seams, and they were standing directly in the middle of it. The siren kept wailing, a high, grinding note that seemed to claw at the inside of Naruto's skull, and for a fraction of a second, no more than that, but long enough that he'd remember it later, his mind went completely blank. Every instinct he had wanted to charge toward the explosion, toward the chaos, toward whatever had just gone wrong at the settlement's center. Then Sasuke's voice cut through the noise, low and urgent at his shoulder. "Orders, Captain?" And just like that, the blank moment passed, and the part of Naruto's mind that had spent the last 2 weeks learning what command actually meant snapped back into focus. "Cover, now," he said, already moving, pulling Sasuke and Sakura back toward the shadow of a low stone wall at the settlement's edge. "We don't move until we know what that explosion actually was. Could be an accident. Could be a trap. Could be someone else's mission gone wrong. Or it could be them finding our operative," Sakura said, crouched beside him, her voice tight. "Yeah," Naruto admitted. "Could be that too." From their position behind the wall, the settlement's layout was becoming clearer in the flickering light of torches and lanterns being hastily lit throughout the compound, a cluster of maybe 30 buildings, arranged in a loose grid, more organized than Naruto had expected from what was supposed to be a lawless border town. Figures were pouring out of buildings now, some clearly panicked, others moving with the disciplined urgency of people who drilled for exactly this kind of emergency. That last detail caught Naruto's attention immediately. Panicked civilians didn't move like that. Trained personnel did. "Sasuke," he said quietly. "Tell me what you're seeing." Sasuke's eyes, sharp, assessing, the Sharingan not yet active but clearly ready to be if the moment called for it, swept across the chaos unfolding in front of them. Too organized for a smuggling operation, he said. Look at the formation those four are running near the eastern building. That's not civilians fleeing a fire. That's a security detail responding to a breach. A breach, Sakura repeated. You think someone else is already inside? I think, Sasuke said slowly, that explosion wasn't an accident. Something set it off on purpose. Question is whether that something was our missing operative trying to create a distraction, or whether it was someone else entirely. Naruto's mind raced through the possibilities, weighing each one against what little intelligence Tsunade had actually given them. Their operative, code name unknown to the three of them, referred to only by her designation in the briefing, Sparrow, had gone dark after sending a distress signal roughly 2 hours before Squad Rho crossed the border. If she triggered that explosion herself, it meant she was likely still alive, still fighting, possibly trying to create exactly the kind of chaos that would let her slip free of whatever had compromised her position. If she hadn't triggered it, that meant someone, or something, else was already operating inside this settlement, and Squad Rho had no idea who. We use the chaos, Naruto decided. Everyone's distracted, everyone's converging on the explosion site. That's our opening. We move now, while attention's split, and we find out what we're actually dealing with before we commit to a full extraction plan. That's a good call, Sasuke said, and there was no hesitation in it this time, none of the half-second delay from the training room, none of the skepticism that had colored every order Naruto had given over the past 10 days. Just immediate, clean agreement. And Naruto felt something settle in his chest at the sound of it, even with everything else happening around them. Sakura, stay tight behind us, Naruto continued. If this goes bad and we need an extraction route, I need you reading the terrain the whole way in, not just following. Already on it, she said, and beneath the blossom mask, Naruto could hear the same steady focus he remembered from the border mission, the version of Sakura that the mission itself seemed to draw out of her. Calm and precise even with chaos exploding around them, they moved. Infiltrating a settlement mid-crisis was, Naruto would later reflect, an entirely different discipline than infiltrating one under quiet cover of night. There was no need for the kind of careful, silent movement they'd trained for. The settlement's own panic provided all the cover they needed, bodies moving in every direction, shouted orders overlapping with genuine cries of alarm. Smoke curling up from the explosion site and blurring visibility across half the compound. Sasuke led them through the chaos with the same fluid, economical movement Naruto had watched countless times over the years, threading between panicked residents and hurrying security personnel alike without drawing a single glance, Sakura close behind, Naruto bringing up the rear and watching their flanks with a hyper-awareness that hadn't fully faded since the ambush on the ridge. They reached the shadow of a long, low building near the settlement's center, close enough to the explosion site now that Naruto could make out the source clearly through the smoke. A storage structure, roof partially collapsed, flames still licking at the exposed beams, security personnel forming a loose perimeter around it while a handful of others worked to contain the fire with buckets and jutsu alike. That's not our operative's handiwork, Sasuke murmured, studying the wreckage. Look at the blast pattern. That's a stored munitions cache going up, not a controlled detonation. Something ignited it, but I don't think it was intentional. Which means? Sakura asked. Which means, Naruto said slowly, piecing it together, either Sparrow set off something she wasn't planning to, trying to escape, or somebody else caused this, and Sparrow's still out there somewhere, and this fire's actually working against us by drawing every guard in the settlement toward the center instead of spreading them thin. As if to punctuate the thought, a sharp, distant cry rang out from somewhere beyond the storage building. Human, female, cut off almost as soon as it started. All three of them went rigid. That way, Sasuke said, already moving. They found the source of the cry in a narrow alley running between two squat buildings on the settlement's northern edge. 3 armed figures surrounding a woman in dark, torn traveling clothes, her hands bound, blood visible at her temple even in the dim light. She'd clearly been putting up a fight. One of her captors was favoring a leg, another nursing what looked like a broken wrist. But 3 against 1, bound and injured, wasn't odds anyone survived for long. That's her, Sakura breathed. That's got to be Sparrow. Naruto didn't waste time confirming it. Go. They hit the alley from both ends simultaneously, Sasuke dropping from the rooftop above, Naruto and Sakura closing the distance at ground level, and the fight, if you could even call it that, was over in seconds. The three captors, already worn down from whatever struggle had left them injured, stood no chance against the coordinated ANBU strike, and within moments all three were down, disarmed, unconscious or close to it. Sakura was at the woman's side immediately, cutting the bindings free with a kunai, checking the head wound with quick, practiced hands. "Sparrow?" Naruto asked, crouching beside her, scanning the alley's entrances for any sign of reinforcements. The woman's eyes, glazed with pain and exhaustion, focused on him slowly, taking in the fox mask, the ANBU armor. "Konoha," she rasped. "Finally, I thought." She winced as Sakura's fingers found the edge of the wound at her temple. "I thought nobody was coming." "We got your signal," Naruto said. "What happened? What is this place?" Sparrow's laugh came out broken, half a cough. "This place? You have no idea what this place actually is, do you? Tsunade sent you thinking this was still a smuggling operation." "It's not?" Sakura asked, already pulling supplies from her kit, working to stabilize the head wound while Sparrow talked. "It was," Sparrow said. 6 months ago. Now it's a staging ground. There's an organization. I don't have a full name for it. They're careful about that. Compartmentalized cell structure. But I've confirmed at least 3 separate factions operating under a shared command structure out of this settlement. Missing mean? Rogue mercenary units. And she paused, breathing hard, and Naruto could see the effort it took her to keep talking through what was clearly significant pain, and at least one group with real shinobi training. Not hired muscle, the genuine article. Naruto felt something cold settle in his stomach. Shinobi. From where? I don't know, Sparrow admitted. That's what I was trying to confirm when they caught me. Whoever's running this, they're not just smuggling goods across the border anymore. They're building something. Weapons caches, coordinated supply lines, and based on some of the documentation I managed to photograph before they caught me, she gestured weakly toward a small, singed pouch still clipped to what remained of her belt. They're planning something bigger than border disruption. Something aimed at Konoha directly. The words hung in the smoke-thick air of the alley, and Naruto exchanged a glance with Sasuke, who had gone very still, processing. How much bigger, Sasuke said. Not really a question. A demand for specifics. I don't know the scale, Sparrow said. But the documents reference a timeline. Weeks, not months. If I had to guess based on what little I saw, they're planning some kind of coordinated strike, possibly timed to coincide with a moment of vulnerability, a diplomatic event, a leadership transition, something that would leave Konoha's defenses stretched thin. Naruto's mind flashed immediately to Minister Doran, to the trade agreement, to the assassination attempt they'd stopped 10 days ago, and the pieces started clicking together in a way that made his blood run cold. The trade agreement, he said slowly. If Doran's assassination had succeeded, it would have thrown the border region into chaos. Maybe enough chaos to create exactly the kind of distraction they're talking about. That's my read too, Sparrow said grimly. Which means you stopping that assassination might have bought Konoha more time than you realize. But it also means whoever's running this operation knows their first plan failed. They're not going to wait quietly for a second opportunity. I want to pause here for a second, because this is the moment the entire shape of this series shifts. Up until now, we've been watching Squad Row work through internal growing pains, a captain finding his footing, a squad learning to trust him, small missions that tested tactics without testing the full weight of what ANBU work actually means. This is the moment that changes. Because what Sparrow just revealed isn't a border skirmish anymore. It's the first thread of a conspiracy that's going to define the rest of this arc. And Naruto, barely 2 weeks into his captaincy, just became one of maybe 5 people in the entire village who knows it exists. That's a lot of weight to put on someone who, 3 chapters ago, was still trying to figure out whether his own teammates trusted him to call a formation shift correctly. But here's the thing about pressure. It doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It just arrives, and you either rise to meet it or you don't. We need to get her out of here, Sakura said, finishing her assessment. The head wound's not life-threatening, but she's got at least 2 cracked ribs, and she's lost a lot of blood. She needs proper medical attention, and she needs it soon. Agreed, Naruto said. But we also need whatever's in that pouch. He turned back to Sparrow. The documents you photographed. Is there more you haven't extracted yet? Anything still inside this settlement that could confirm the scale of what we're dealing with? Sparrow hesitated, and even through her exhaustion, Naruto could see her weighing the question with the same careful calculation that had probably kept her alive under cover for months. There's a command structure inside the largest building at the settlement's center, she said finally. Heavily guarded, more heavily than anywhere else in this place. I never got inside. That's actually how I got caught, trying to find a way in 3 nights ago. But if there's a full accounting of what they're planning, that's where it would be. Naruto felt the decision settling onto his shoulders like a physical weight, and this was it. This was exactly the kind of moment Kakashi had warned him about back in the armorer's room, back on their very first day as Squad Rho. Being loved by a village and being obeyed by a squad are two very different things. Because right now, in this alley, with an injured operative bleeding under Sakura's hands and a settlement full of hostile personnel between them and the exit, the easy call, the safe call, was extraction. Get Sparrow to safety. Report back to Tsunade with what they already knew. Let a larger, better prepared force handle the deeper infiltration. But every second they waited, whatever was being planned against Konoha moved closer to whatever timeline Sparrow had glimpsed in those documents. And if Squad Rho pulled out now, they'd be handing that information back to a village that would need days, maybe weeks, to mount another operation, time they might not have. Captain, Sasuke said quietly, watching him with an intensity that told Naruto his teammate had already guessed exactly what was going through his head. Whatever you're thinking, say it out loud. This isn't the moment for hesitation. Naruto took a breath. Sakura, you extract Sparrow. Get her clear of the settlement, back toward the rendezvous point we marked on the approach. If you hit resistance, you fall back and wait for us. Do not engage a force you can't handle alone while protecting an injured asset. And you too? Sakura asked, though her expression told Naruto she'd already guessed the answer and wasn't thrilled about it. Sasuke and I go for the command building, Naruto said. We confirm what Sparrow saw. If there's documentation, we extract it. If it's too heavily guarded to get in clean, we pull back and regroup at the rendezvous point, and we bring what we already know to Tsunade instead. But we don't leave this settlement without at least trying to confirm the scale of what we're dealing with. Too much is riding on it. Sakura's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue, not with the reasoning, at least, though Naruto could see the protest forming behind her eyes regardless. Splitting up mid-crisis in hostile territory isn't exactly textbook. No, Naruto agreed. It's not. But neither is finding out Konoha might be the target of a coordinated strike we know almost nothing about. I need eyes inside that building before we leave, and I need Sparrow safe more than I need a third pair of hands doing it. This is the call. For a moment, Sakura just looked at him, and Naruto braced himself, half expecting the same kind of pushback Sasuke had given him in the training room. The accumulated weight of every doubt any of them still carried about his judgment, under pressure. Instead, she nodded. Copy that, Captain, she said, and there was something different in her voice now, something that hadn't been there during the border mission, a kind of settled trust that Naruto recognized. With a small jolt, as exactly the thing Kakashi had told him would take time and repetition to build. Maybe it was building faster than either of them realized. Sasuke, Naruto said, turning to him. You good with this plan? Sasuke was quiet for a beat, studying him with the same assessing look he'd worn through most of the last 2 weeks. But there was something different in it now too, Naruto thought. Less skepticism. More genuine calculation, the kind Sasuke reserved for plans he was actually taking seriously rather than ones he was preparing to argue against. It's risky, Sasuke said. But it's the right call. Let's move before that fire draws every guard in this settlement toward us instead of away. Sakura moved fast, half carrying Sparrow through the settlement's outer edge, sticking to shadow and using the ongoing chaos around the storage building as cover, and within minutes, Naruto lost sight of them entirely. Trusting Sakura's judgment to get their injured operative clear without him watching over her shoulder, trusting her the same way he was asking her to trust him. That left Naruto and Sasuke, moving together through the settlement's winding paths toward the large structure at its center that Sparrow had identified, and even from a distance, it was obvious why she'd called it heavily guarded. Where the rest of the settlement had descended into the loose chaos of fire response and panic, the perimeter around this particular building remained tight, disciplined, guards stationed at regular intervals with the kind of alert posture that suggested real training rather than hired muscle. For visible, Sasuke murmured, the two of them crouched in the shadow of a neighboring structure, studying the building's layout. Probably more we can't see. Windows are shuttered, single main entrance, likely a rear exit we can't confirm from this angle. Options, Naruto said. Rooftop approach, Sasuke said after a moment's consideration. The building's roof isn't as heavily watched. Makes sense, nobody expects an infiltration attempt from above in a settlement this size. If we can get onto the roof without being spotted, there's likely an access point we can use to drop in from above rather than fighting through the front guards. Naruto studied the roof lines, running the plan through his head, weighing the risk against the alternative. Do it. I'll take point, you cover from the flank in case they've got roof sensors we can't see from here. They moved. The rooftop approach worked cleaner than Naruto had dared hope. The settlement's chaos providing exactly the kind of cover they needed. Guards' attention split between the burning storage building and the general unrest rippling through the compound, nobody thinking to check the roofline of the one structure that should have mattered most. They found the access point Sasuke had predicted. A skylight, likely meant for ventilation rather than security. Its latch old and poorly maintained compared to the reinforced door they'd glimpsed at the building's front entrance. Sasuke made quick work of the latch, and within moments the two of them dropped silently into the darkness below, landing in what turned out to be a narrow storage loft overlooking a larger room beneath. And that room, Naruto felt his breath catch the moment he took it in, confirmed everything Sparrow had feared, and then some. Maps covered every wall, marked with symbols and annotations Naruto didn't fully understand at a glance, but the general shape of it was unmistakable even to someone without formal intelligence training. Supply routes, marked positions, and at the center of it all, a large-scale map of the Land of Fire itself, with Konoha circled in red ink and a web of smaller marks radiating outward from it like the settlement was tracking approach vectors. Documents were stacked across a long table beneath the maps, alongside crates that, even from the loft above, Naruto could see were stamped with markings he didn't recognize, foreign, possibly, or deliberately obscured. That's not a smuggling operations supply room, Sasuke breathed beside him, and even his usually flat, controlled voice carried a thread of genuine alarm. That's a war room. Naruto's mind raced, cataloging everything he could see, trying to commit as much of it to memory as possible in case they never made it back with physical evidence. The scale of it was staggering, far beyond anything Tsunade's briefing had prepared him for, far beyond even Sparrow's warning about a coordinated strike. This wasn't a single faction planning a single attack. This looked like a genuine, organized campaign, months in the planning, aimed directly at the heart of the village that had raised him. We need those documents, Naruto said quietly. Not just eyes on them. Physical proof. Or Tsunade's going to be fighting the council for weeks trying to justify a full mobilization based on our word alone. Then we go down, Sasuke said, already scanning the room below for the safest entry point. Grab what we can, and get out before anyone realizes we were ever here. They dropped from the loft in near silence, boots barely whispering against the wooden floor below, and Naruto moved immediately toward the document table, scanning through the papers with the kind of fast, methodical urgency that came from knowing every second in this room was a second closer to discovery. Sasuke covered the room's single door, senses stretched taut, watching for any sign that their presence had been noted. Naruto's hands found a thick, bound ledger near the table's edge, and even a cursory glance at the first page sent a fresh chill through him. Names, dates, resource allocations, all of it written in a careful, methodical hand that suggested whoever kept these records took their operation with deadly seriousness. He tucked it into his pack without hesitation, along with a handful of loose documents from the surrounding table, moving as quickly as his hands would allow. Naruto. Sasuke's voice, low and urgent, cut through his focus. Movement outside. Multiple signatures, converging on this building. Naruto's head snapped up. How many? Too many, Sasuke said grimly. I think someone noticed the skylight latch was disturbed. How many? Naruto said again, quieter this time, already shoving the last of the documents into his pack. Enough that we're not fighting our way out the front, Sasuke said, positioned near the doorway now, Sharingan fully active, tracking movement through gaps in the shuttered windows. I count at least 6 converging on this building specifically. Not the general chaos from the fire, these are moving with purpose. Someone flagged the skylight. Naruto's mind raced through the options, each one collapsing under scrutiny almost as fast as he could form it. 6 hostiles, minimum, converging on a single building with one confirmed exit and a compromised rooftop access point. No backup. Sakura already gone, hopefully clear of the settlement by now with Sparrow, but with no way to confirm it and no time to try. Rooftop, Naruto decided. Same way we came in. If they've flagged the skylight, they'll expect us to avoid it, which means it might actually still be our best option, because they'll have redirected attention toward the ground floor entrances. That's a gamble, Sasuke said. Everything about tonight's been a gamble, Naruto shot back, already moving toward the loft. You have a better red? A beat of silence, and then Sasuke fell in step beside him. No. Move. They'd barely made it halfway up the loft ladder when the building's main door shattered inward. Here's the thing about a real fight, and I mean a real one, not a training exercise, not a drill against mercenaries who'd clearly never faced actual shinobi before, is that it doesn't announce itself with the kind of dramatic pause you'd expect from a story. 1 second the room was quiet except for the creak of the ladder under Naruto's weight. The next, it was chaos, figures pouring through the shattered doorway, at least 4 visible immediately, moving with a coordinated precision that told Naruto everything he needed to know about what they were actually facing. These weren't mercenaries. Sparrow had been right. Whatever training these people carried, it was real. Down! Sasuke barked, and Naruto dropped from the ladder just as a kunai embedded itself in the wood where his head had been a half-second earlier. The fight that followed was unlike anything Naruto had experienced since the war, not because of the numbers, which were manageable, but because of the quality of the opposition. Where the mercenaries on the border mission had fought with raw aggression and minimal technique, these attackers moved with genuine discipline, coordinating their strikes, covering each other's blind spots, adjusting tactics in real time as Naruto and Sasuke's own fighting styles became apparent. Sasuke engaged the 2 nearest attackers with brutal efficiency, his Sharingan tracking their movements a fraction of a second ahead of each strike. But even he was forced to work harder than usual. His usual economy of motion stretched thin by opponents who refused to give him the clean openings he was used to exploiting. Naruto fought differently, as always, pulling on speed and adaptability rather than precision, using clones to split attention and create openings where none naturally existed. But even his instincts strained against the sheer coordination of the attack. Every time he thought he'd found an opening, a second attacker closed the gap before he could exploit it. They're working together, he shouted to Sasuke over the chaos. Actual formation tactics. This isn't hard muscle. I noticed, Sasuke said dryly, driving a kunai through the shoulder of an attacker who'd gotten too close, twisting away before the man's counter-strike could land. A 5th figure emerged from the doorway, taller than the others, moving with a stillness that immediately marked him as different, more dangerous, the kind of presence that made every other combatant in the room instinctively adjust their positioning to account for him. He wore no obvious insignia, no identifying marks beyond a plain dark mask that covered the lower half of his face, but the way the other attackers deferred to him, falling back slightly to create space, told Naruto everything he needed to know. Command structure. This was someone in charge. Leave Shinobi, the masked man said, voice carrying an edge of genuine curiosity rather than alarm, as though he'd been expecting exactly this kind of intrusion eventually, and was simply confirming the timeline. Faster than we anticipated. Tsunade's gotten aggressive. Who are you? Naruto demanded, putting himself between the man and the loft ladder, and the pack strapped to his back, heavy now with everything they'd managed to grab from the war room. Someone who's about to make sure you don't leave this building with what you're carrying, the man said, and moved. I want to slow down here for a second, because this is a genuinely important beat for the series. This is the first named threat we've gotten a real look at, and I promise you, this isn't going to be the last time this masked commander shows up in Squad Row's story. Keep him in the back of your mind. He matters more than this single chapter is going to let on. But right now, in the moment, all that mattered to Naruto was survival. his, Sasuke's, and the intelligence in his pack that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The masked commander moved with a speed that immediately told Naruto he was outmatched in a straight one-on-one exchange. Faster than the mercenaries from the border mission. Faster even than most of the jonin Naruto had sparred against during his training, closing the distance between them before Naruto had fully processed the threat, and driving a strike toward his ribs that he barely managed to deflect with a kunai raised just in time. The impact sent a jolt of pain through his arm regardless, the kunai nearly torn from his grip by the sheer force behind the blow. Naruto! Sasuke's voice, sharp with alarm, cut through the chaos. But he was engaged with two of his own attackers, unable to break free to help without leaving himself exposed. Naruto rolled with the momentum of the deflected strike, putting distance between himself and the commander, already forming the seal for a clone technique with hands that weren't quite steady. 3 clones burst into existence around him, spreading out, forcing the commander to split his attention across multiple targets. It bought him maybe 2 seconds. The commander cut through the first clone with a single, precise strike, barely slowing his advance, and Naruto realized with a cold, sinking certainty that raw numbers weren't going to be enough against someone this skilled. He needed a different approach. Sasuke, on my mark, break toward the door. Naruto shouted, already forming a new plan, piecing together the room's layout, the position of the remaining attackers, the location of the shattered entrance. And do what? Sasuke called back, ducking under a strike and countering with a burst of fire that forced his own attacker back several steps. Trust me, there was a beat, the smallest possible hesitation, and Naruto felt it like a physical thing even in the middle of the fight, the last echo of the doubt that had defined so much of their dynamics since the induction ceremony. Then mark it. Naruto drove his remaining clones into a coordinated push against the commander, buying just enough of an opening, and as the man's attention fractured across the assault, Naruto threw a smoke pellet at the ground between them, the room dissolving into thick, choking gray in an instant. Now! He shouted, and through the smoke, he heard Sasuke break from his engagement, felt rather than saw his teammate closing the distance toward the doorway, and Naruto followed, using the chaos and cover to put desperately needed distance between himself and the masked commander's blade. They burst out of the building's shattered entrance into the settlement's chaos beyond, the fire from the storage building still raging somewhere behind them, smoke thick in the night air, shouts and running footsteps echoing from every direction. That's not going to hold them long, Sasuke said, already moving, angling toward the settlement's northern edge where they'd left Sakura and Sparrow behind. It doesn't need to hold them long, Naruto said, adrenaline still hammering through his veins. It just needs to hold them long enough to get clear. They ran. The rendezvous point they'd marked on approach, a small rise in the terrain roughly half a mile beyond the settlement's northern perimeter, sheltered by a cluster of low trees, should have been quiet. Should have been Sakura and Sparrow waiting, ready to move the moment Naruto and Sasuke arrived, the 4 of them slipping back across the border together before anyone realized the full extent of what had just happened in that command building. It wasn't quiet. Naruto heard the fighting before he saw it, the distinct clash of kunai against kunai, a sharp cry of pain that made his blood run cold because he recognized the voice even distorted by distance and panic. Sakura. He didn't remember consciously deciding to run faster. 1 second he was processing the sound, the next he was moving at a speed that left even Sasuke working to keep pace, cresting the rise to find a scene that stopped his heart cold. 2 attackers, not mercenaries, these carried the same disciplined bearing as the ones in the command building, had cornered Sakura and Sparrow against a rock formation. Sparrow, still too injured to fight effectively, slumped against the stone with a kunai clutched in a shaking hand, while Sakura stood between her and the 2 attackers, blood streaming from a gash along her upper arm, her stance still steady despite the obvious pain, still fighting, still holding the line. Sakura! Naruto's shout tore from his throat as he closed the final distance, and the world narrowed to a single, desperate focus. He hit the nearest attacker with a speed born entirely of adrenaline and fear, driving the man back several steps before he even fully registered Naruto's arrival, and Sasuke was a half-second behind him, engaging the second attacker with a controlled fury that made short work of the fight now that the numbers had evened. It was over in under a minute, both attackers down, disarmed, the immediate threat neutralized, but the relief that should have followed didn't come, because the moment Naruto turned to check on Sakura, he saw the truth of what that gash on her arm actually was. Not a minor wound. Not something that would hold until they made it back to Konoha. A deep laceration, severed muscle visible beneath torn flesh, blood loss already visibly affecting her balance, her face gone pale beneath the blossom mask she'd pushed up in order to see clearly enough to fight. Sakura, Naruto said again, quieter now, dropping to his knees beside her as her legs finally buckled, catching her before she hit the ground. Hey, look at me, stay with me. I'm fine, she managed, though her voice had gone thin, breathless in a way that told him exactly how far from fine she actually was. Sparrow, protect Sparrow, she can't. Sasuke's got her, Naruto said, and it was true. Sasuke had already moved to Sparrow's side, checking her over, confirming she was still conscious and stable enough to move, though clearly no closer to full strength than she'd been an hour earlier. Naruto's hands moved instinctively toward the wound on Sakura's arm, applying pressure the way he'd watched her do 100 times for other people. His own training woefully inadequate compared to hers, but enough, he hoped, to slow the bleeding until they could get her real help. How bad, he said, and he heard his own voice crack slightly on the words, the adrenaline of the fight curdling into something closer to raw terror now that the immediate threat had passed, and the true cost of it was settling in. Bad enough, Sakura said, wincing as his hands found the wound. Nick's something important. I can feel it. I need a proper medical seal, more than field dressing's going to manage. Can you do it yourself? Naruto asked, though even as he said it, he could see the answer in the way her hands trembled too much to form the necessary seals with any precision. Not like this, she admitted, and there was a rawness in the admission that told Naruto exactly how much it cost her to say it out loud. This is the moment, if you've been with this series long enough, where you probably expected things to go differently. Maybe you thought the injury would land on Sasuke, given everything we've built toward with his character. Maybe you thought Naruto himself would take the hit, some dramatic near-death moment to test his resolve. But I wanted this moment to belong to Sakura, because here's the truth this series keeps circling back to. The person who's been holding this squad together with pure, unglamorous competence, the one voicing hard truths in training rooms and steadying injured operatives in alleyways, is also the one who just took the worst hit of the mission protecting someone weaker than herself. That's not incidental. That's the whole point of who Sakura Haruno actually is. And now it's Naruto's turn to prove he understands that. Okay, Naruto said, forcing his voice steady even as panic clawed at the edges of his composure. Okay. Sasuke, how far to the border crossing from here? 20 minutes at a hard pace, Sasuke said, already assessing Sparrow's condition with the same clinical focus he'd need to help carry her if it came to that. Less if we cut through the ravine instead of the main trail. That's too long for her to lose blood at this rate, Naruto said, thinking fast, his hands still pressed hard against Sakura's wound. We need to slow the bleeding properly, now, before we move. There's a technique, Sakura managed, her voice growing weaker but still clear enough to guide him. Medical seal. I can talk you through the hand signs if you can't remember them from field training. Talk me through it, Naruto said immediately. What followed was one of the strangest, most viscerally terrifying experiences of Naruto's life, kneeling in the dark with Sakura's blood on his hands, following her weakening, precise instructions as he formed unfamiliar hand seals with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling, channeling chakra in a way that felt nothing like the raw, overwhelming power he was used to wielding, and everything like an act of desperate, careful precision he never had to master before. The first attempt failed, the chakra flow uneven, and Sakura hissed in pain as it fizzled without effect. Again, she said through gritted teeth. Slower this time. You're pushing too much chakra too fast. This needs precision, not volume. Naruto forced himself to breathe, to slow down, to treat this exactly the way he'd learned to treat a captain's call under pressure, not with brute force, but with the kind of controlled adaptability that had gotten them through every crisis so far. The second attempt held. He felt it the moment the seal took, a subtle shift in the wound beneath his hands, the frantic pulse of blood loss slowing to something manageable, Sakura's breath easing out in a shaky exhale of relief. That's good, she said, some color returning to her face, though she was still clearly weak, still clearly in pain. That'll hold until we reach real medical care. Good work, Captain. The word landed differently this time than it ever had before. Not a title being tested, not a challenge wrapped in politeness, but something closer to genuine, exhausted gratitude. Naruto allowed himself exactly one breath to feel the relief of it before shoving the emotion aside, because there was still a border to cross and an injured squad to get there. Sasuke, he said, rising, can you carry Sparrow? Already planned on it, Sasuke said, already lifting the injured operative with careful efficiency. I've got Sakura, Naruto said, and lifted her as gently as the urgency of the moment allowed, her weight lighter than he expected, a fact that worried him more than it reassured him. We move now, fast as we can without risking the wound reopening. Sasuke didn't argue. Didn't question the plan, didn't hesitate the way he might have 2 weeks ago. Just nodded, and the two of them set off toward the border at the fastest pace their injured passengers could safely endure, the settlement's chaos fading into the distance behind them, smoke still rising against the night sky. The crossing back into Konoha's territory happened in a blur that Naruto would only partially remember afterward. The burning ache in his legs from carrying Sakura's weight at a punishing pace, the constant, low-grade terror of watching for any sign the medical seal might be failing, Sasuke's steady presence beside him the entire way, matching his pace step for step without complaint despite carrying his own injured burden. They reached the first Konoha checkpoint just as the sky had begun to lighten toward dawn, and the moment the checkpoint guards recognized the ANBU insignia on their gear despite the missing masks, lost somewhere in the chaos of the fight, everything shifted into the efficient, practiced urgency of an emergency medical response. Sakura and Sparrow were taken from their arms by hospital-bound medical shinobi within minutes, whisked away on stretchers toward the village's main medical facility, and for the first time since the alley fight, Naruto found himself standing still, hands still stained with Sakura's blood, watching her disappear through the checkpoint gates without him. She'll be okay, Sasuke said quietly beside him, and it took Naruto a moment to register that Sasuke, who rarely offered comfort of any kind, was the one saying it. You don't know that, Naruto said, his voice rougher than he intended. No, Sasuke admitted. But the seal held. You held it together when it mattered. That counts for something. Naruto looked at him, really looked for the first time since the fight in the command building, and saw something in Sasuke's expression that hadn't been there before. Not the skepticism from the training room. Not the careful, evaluating distance he'd maintained since the induction ceremony. Something closer to the beginning of real trust, hard-won and still fragile, but genuinely there. You didn't hesitate back there, Naruto said. In the building. When I said trust me? No, Sasuke agreed. I didn't. He didn't elaborate further, and Naruto didn't push him to. Some things, he was learning, didn't need to be spoken outright to be understood. Tsunade received them within the hour, the pack of documents from the command building laid out across her desk, her expression growing steadily grimmer as she paged through the ledger Naruto had grabbed in those final, desperate minutes before the fight broke out. Kakashi stood near the window, arms crossed, listening with the same intense focus he always carried into these debriefs, but there was something different in his posture tonight, something that told Naruto he understood exactly how close this mission had come to a far worse outcome. Sakura's condition? Tsunade asked without looking up from the documents. Stable, Naruto said, the word costing him more effort than it should have, exhaustion and adrenaline crash finally catching up with him now that the immediate crisis had passed. The medics say the seal held long enough to prevent permanent damage. She'll need time to recover, but she'll be okay. And Sparrow? Same, Naruto said. Battered but stable. Tsunade finally looked up, her sharp eyes taking in the state of both of them, the blood still staining Naruto's hands and sleeves, the exhaustion carved into every line of Sasuke's usually composed expression. Tell me what happened, she said. All of it. Naruto gave his report, and it wasn't the clean, confident debrief he'd delivered after the border mission 2 weeks ago. This one came haltingly, honestly, laying out every decision, the choice to split the squad, the choice to push deeper into the command building instead of extracting immediately, the fight with the masked commander, the ambush at the rendezvous point that had nearly cost Sakura her life. I made the call to split up, Naruto said finally, his voice steady despite the guilt threading through every word. If I'd extracted immediately instead of pushing for more intelligence, Sakura and Sparrow might not have been exposed at the rendezvous point as long as they were. That's on me. Tsunade was quiet for a long moment, studying him with an expression that gave away nothing. Would that intelligence have mattered? She asked finally, gesturing at the documents spread across her desk. If you'd extracted immediately, without confirming the scale of what's actually being planned here, would Konoha be better prepared right now, or worse? Naruto hesitated. Worse, he admitted. We wouldn't have known any of this. Then your call was sound, Tsunade said, even though the cost was real. That's the hardest lesson command teaches, Naruto, and I'm sorry you're learning it this early. Sometimes the right decision still costs something you didn't want to pay. That doesn't make it the wrong decision. It just makes it a hard one. Kakashi spoke up from the window, his voice quieter than usual. The mark of a captain isn't whether people get hurt on their missions. Injuries happen. People die sometimes, even under the best leadership imaginable. The mark of a captain is whether they can look at a decision like the one you made tonight, understand exactly what it cost, and still make the same call again if the stakes demanded it. Can you do that? Naruto thought about Sakura's blood on his hands, about the fear that had gripped him watching her legs buckle, about the desperate, fumbling attempt to remember a medical seal he'd only half learned in passing. Yes, he said, and he meant it, even though the honesty of the answer scared him more than he wanted to admit. I'd make the same call. I want to get better at making it cost less. Tsunade's expression softened, just slightly, something that might have been approval flickering behind her sharp eyes. That's the right answer, she said. Get some rest, both of you. We'll reconvene once Sakura's cleared to discuss what this intelligence actually means for the village's defenses. And Naruto, he paused at the door. Good work tonight, she said. I mean that. Not because nobody got hurt, because you made the hard calls anyway, and you brought your squad home. Naruto found himself outside Sakura's hospital room an hour later, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion dragging at every part of him, watching through the small window as medical staff finished the last of their work, stabilizing her properly now that the field seal had bought enough time for real treatment. Sasuke found him there, leaning against the corridor wall, and for a while, either of them spoke. You did good, Sasuke said finally, quiet enough that it felt almost private, meant only for the two of them in the empty hospital corridor. She got hurt because of a call I made, Naruto said. She got hurt because we're doing dangerous work, Sasuke corrected. That's different. You didn't hesitate when it mattered. You made the seal work when her life depended on it. 2 weeks ago, I wasn't sure you had that in you, not the technical skill, the actual nerve to hold steady when someone you cared about was bleeding out in your hands. Naruto looked at him, surprised by the bluntness of it. And now? He asked. Sasuke was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same careful precision he brought to everything. Now I think Tsunade might have been right about you, he said. I'm still watching. I'm still going to push back when I think you're wrong. But I don't think this squad's success is riding on luck anymore, Naruto. I think it's riding on you actually being capable of this. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't the kind of moment that resolved years of rivalry in a single, cinematic instant. But it was real, and honest, and worth more to Naruto in that exhausted hospital corridor than almost anything else he could have heard. Thanks, he said quietly. Sasuke nodded once, and the two of them settled into a silence that felt, for the first time since the induction ceremony, genuinely comfortable. Two teammates who had bled for each other, in every sense of the word, and come out the other side with something stronger than they'd started with. Sakura spent 4 days in the hospital before the medics cleared her for anything resembling active duty, and Naruto spent most of those 4 days somewhere between the hospital corridor and Tsunade's office, alternating between checking on her recovery and poring over the documents Squad Rho had risked their lives to recover. The ledger, in particular, had become something of an obsession, not just for Naruto, but for the small, tightly controlled team of intelligence analysts Tsunade had assigned to decode it. Pages of names, dates, resource allocations, written in a dense, methodical shorthand that took the analysts the better part of 3 days just to establish a working framework for translation. By the 4th day, when Sakura was finally discharged with strict orders to avoid strenuous activity for at least another week, the picture the ledger painted had become clear enough to bring the full weight of it crashing down on Naruto's shoulders. It's worse than we thought, Tsunade said, standing over the ledger spread across her desk, the same weary grimness in her voice that Naruto had come to associate with genuinely bad news. Kakashi stood beside her, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, Shizen had been asked to leave the room, a detail that immediately set Naruto's nerves on edge before anyone said another word. Where's how? Naruto asked, standing beside Sasuke, both of them fully healed from the mission but carrying the particular fatigue that came from days of waiting for answers rather than acting on them. Sakura stood slightly apart, her arms still wrapped in careful medical bandaging beneath her sleeve, present at the debrief despite the medic's recommendation that she rest, a fact Tsunade had allowed without argument. Understanding, Naruto suspected, that keeping Sakura out of this conversation would have been a losing battle regardless. The resource allocations in this ledger, Tsunade said, tapping a specific page, don't just track smuggled goods and mercenary payments. They track intelligence purchases. Specific intelligence, cross-referenced against dates that align disturbingly well with mission failures we've logged over the past 8 months. The room went very still. You're saying, Sasuke said slowly, that this organization has been paying for information from inside Konoha. That's exactly what I'm saying, Tsunade confirmed. And it explains a lot that's been bothering me for longer than I've admitted publicly. 3 separate ANBU operations over the last year that should have succeeded, and instead ran directly into ambushes that shouldn't have been possible without advance warning. A supply convoy that was intercepted with suspiciously precise timing. And now, an assassination attempt against Minister Doran that came within a hair's breadth of succeeding, followed by an entire staging operation aimed at the village, apparently informed by intelligence they shouldn't have had access to in the first place. Naruto felt something cold settle into his stomach, the implications of what Tsunade was describing sinking in with the particular weight of a truth he didn't want to accept. Someone inside the village, he said quietly. Someone with access to operational intelligence. That's the working theory, Kakashi confirmed, his single visible eye carrying none of its usual lazy calm. And it's not a small circle of suspects, unfortunately. Access to the kind of intelligence referenced in this ledger requires clearance most Jonin don't even have, mission planning details, ANBU deployment schedules, diplomatic itineraries. We're looking at someone embedded relatively high in the village's intelligence or command structure. How high? Sakura asked, her voice tight. Tsunade's jaw tightened. High enough that I'm not comfortable discussing this investigation through normal channels. That's why I've kept this conversation to the 4 of us, plus a small handful of analysts I trust with my life. If word gets out that we suspect a leak this significant, whoever's responsible will either go dormant or accelerate whatever they're planning next. Neither outcome helps us. I want to pause here for a second, because I think it's worth sitting with just how much the emotional temperature of this series has shifted since Chapter 1. We started with the squad struggling to figure out whether they trusted each other. Now they're being asked to consider that the threat isn't just external. It might be someone they've worked alongside, someone wearing a Konoha headband, someone none of them have any reason yet to suspect. That's a different kind of fear entirely. And it's about to become Squad Row's entire world for the next several weeks. So what's the plan? Naruto asked, forcing himself to focus on the practical shape of the problem rather than the unsettling scope of it. We can't exactly interrogate half the village's command structure without tipping our hand. No, Tsunade agreed. Which is why I'm assigning Squad Row to conduct a covert internal investigation, working in parallel with my analysts but operating independently enough that if the leak does trace back to someone with visibility into standard investigative channels, they won't see it coming from your direction. You want us investigating our own people, Sasuke said, his tone carefully neutral, though Naruto could hear the discomfort underneath it. I want you finding the truth, Tsunade said. Whoever this is, they've already gotten operatives killed and nearly got Sakura killed as well. I'm not interested in protecting anyone's reputation at the expense of finding them. But I also understand this isn't like the missions you've run so far. This requires patience, discretion, and a willingness to suspect people you might respect, possibly people you've served alongside for years. That's a different kind of difficult than a fight in hostile territory. Naruto exchanged a glance with Sasuke and Sakura, feeling the weight of what was being asked of them settle over the room. Where do we start? He asked. Tsunade slid a folder across the desk, thinner than Naruto expected, given the gravity of the situation, though he understood immediately why. Investigations built on suspicion rather than certainty rarely came with thick files. The ledger references 3 specific intelligence purchases by codename only, Tsunade said. No names, unfortunately. Whoever's running the operation was careful about that. But the timing and content of each purchase narrows the pool of potential sources considerably. I want you cross-referencing mission assignment records, personnel movement logs, and communication patterns against the dates in this ledger. Find the overlap. Find who had access to all 3 pieces of compromised intelligence. And once we have a name? Sakura asked. Then we proceed very, very carefully, Tsunade said. Because if we're wrong, we've just accused a loyal shinobi of treason based on circumstantial evidence, and that's not a mistake this village can afford to make publicly. And if we're right, her expression darkened further, then we're dealing with someone dangerous enough, and connected enough, that a wrong move on our part could get all 3 of you killed before we ever bring them to justice. The investigation that followed bore almost no resemblance to the kind of mission work Squad Rho had trained for. There was no infiltration, no combat, no clear tactical objective to plan around. Instead, there were days spent in a cramped records room 3 levels beneath the Hokage Tower, cross-referencing personnel files against mission logs, building timelines, searching for patterns in the vast, tedious sprawl of the village's administrative history. Naruto found it, in its own way, more exhausting than any of the physical missions they'd run so far. Combat had a clarity to it, a threat in front of you, a decision to make, an outcome that arrived fast enough to process in real time. This was different. This was slow, grinding uncertainty, the constant low hum of paranoia that came from knowing the person responsible for all of this might be someone whose face they'd see in the mess hall, whose name they might recognize from a shared mission years ago. This is going to take weeks at this pace, Sasuke said on the 3rd day, rubbing at his eyes as he set down another stack of personnel files, the low light of the records room doing nothing to ease the strain of hours spent poring over faded ink and cramped handwriting. We don't have weeks, Sakura said, not looking up from her own stack, her injured arm resting carefully on the table beside her, as she worked one-handed through a set of mission assignment logs. Whatever's being planned against Konoha, Sparrow said the timeline was weeks, not months. Every day we spend here is a day closer to whatever they're building toward. I know that, Sasuke said, an edge of frustration creeping into his voice that Naruto recognized immediately. Not directed at Sakura, not really, but at the situation itself. The maddening slowness of an investigation that demanded patience none of them particularly possessed. Then let's narrow it down smarter, Naruto said, setting down his own stack and rubbing at the back of his neck. Trying to think through the problem the way he'd learned to think through a tactical formation, not by brute forcing every possibility, but by finding the shape of the thing and working from there. The ledger references 3 intelligence purchases. What do we actually know about them specifically? Sakura pulled the folder Tsunade had given them, flipping to the relevant page. First purchase, roughly 8 months ago, correlates with the failed extraction attempt in the Land of Rivers. ANBU squad walked into an ambush that should have been impossible without knowledge of their exact route and timing. Second purchase, Sasuke continued 5 months ago. Correlates with the supply convoy interception. Same pattern, precise timing, no way to explain it without inside knowledge of the convoy's schedule. Third purchase, Naruto said, checking the most recent entry, roughly 6 weeks before Minister Doran's assassination attempt, which lines up with when the smuggling faction would have needed advance warning of his travel plans to actually organize an ambush along his route. So we're looking for someone with access to ANBU deployment routes 8 months ago, supply convoy schedules 5 months ago, and diplomatic travel itineraries 6 weeks before the Doran attempt, Sakura said, working through the logic out loud. That's a specific combination. Not every high-clearance shinobi would have visibility into all 3 categories. Which narrows the pool considerably, Naruto said, feeling something shift in the tedium of the investigation, a genuine thread finally emerging from the noise. Who has access to ANBU deployment, convoy logistics, and diplomatic scheduling? They worked through the personnel records with fresh urgency, and by the end of the day, the pool of potential suspects had narrowed from an overwhelming, unmanageable sprawl to a list of 11 names, still too many to act on directly, but small enough to feel, for the first time since the investigation began, genuinely tractable. Over the following days, that list of 11 shrank further, each name eliminated through careful, quiet verification, alibis confirmed, access logs cross-checked, movements accounted for. It was painstaking work, the kind that demanded a level of discipline and patience Naruto hadn't fully appreciated ANBU work required until he was neck-deep in it. But slowly, methodically, the list contracted. 11 became 7. 7 became 4. And it was somewhere in the process of narrowing those 4 down further that Naruto noticed something that made his stomach turn cold. "Sakura," he said quietly, late on the 6th day of the investigation, the records room empty except for the 3 of them, and the low hum of the single lamp they'd been working under for hours. "Come look at this." She crossed to where he sat, studying a personnel file he'd pulled from the remaining stack, and he watched her expression shift as she read the same details he had. Access clearance, mission history, a pattern of proximity to all 3 compromised operations that couldn't be easily explained away by coincidence. "That can't be right," she said, her voice quieter than he'd heard it in days. "I know," Naruto said. "I've read it 4 times hoping I'm missing something." Sasuke crossed the room, drawn by the tension in their voices, and read the file over Naruto's shoulder in silence. For a long moment, none of them said anything, the weight of what the document suggested settling heavy over the small, cramped room. "We need to bring this to Tsunade," Sasuke said finally, his voice carefully controlled in the way it always was when he was working hard to keep genuine emotion out of it. "Tonight. Before we do anything else. If we're wrong about this," Sakura started. "If we're wrong," Naruto said, "we bring Tsunade what we've found and let her make the call on how to proceed. That's not our decision to make alone. But we can't sit on this. Not with what's at stake. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought about naming this person right here, right now, ending the chapter with the reveal and letting you sit with it for a week. But I decided against it, and here's why. The reveal isn't actually the point of this chapter. The point is what it cost Squad Row to get here, the tedious, grinding, paranoid work of suspecting people you're supposed to trust, the moment where the investigation stops being abstract and becomes a name on a page that changes everything about how you see the people around you. So we're going to sit in that uncertainty for just a little longer. Because Naruto's about to have to sit in it too." Tsunade received them in her office well past the hour most of the tower's staff had gone home, the building quiet around them in a way that made the whole encounter feel more clandestine than any of their previous debriefs. Naruto laid the file on her desk without a word, watching her expression as she read through it. The same careful, methodical read-through he'd given it hours earlier, the same slow darkening of her expression as the implications settled in. "You're certain of this," she said finally, not looking up from the file. "We've cross-checked everything 3 times, Sakura said. Access clearance, mission proximity, the timeline. It all lines up. But we know how serious an accusation like this is. We wanted you to see it before we did anything else." Tsunade was quiet for a long moment, her jaw tight, something working behind her eyes that Naruto couldn't quite name. Not disbelief, exactly, but something closer to a reluctant, painful recognition. "I need more than circumstantial access patterns before I move on this," she said finally. "Do you understand what you're asking me to consider? If this is accurate, it means someone I've trusted for years has been selling operational intelligence to an organization actively planning an attack on this village. That's not an accusation I can act on without absolute certainty." "What do you need from us?" Naruto asked. "Confirmation," Tsunade said. "Direct evidence, not just circumstantial proximity. I want you watching this individual, quietly, carefully, without tipping your hand. If the pattern holds, if there's an active channel of communication still operating, I want it confirmed beyond any possible doubt before we move." "And if we confirm it," Sasuke said. Tsunade's expression hardened into something that reminded Naruto, uncomfortably, of the woman who'd stood before them during the war, making decisions that carried the weight of the entire village on every word. "Then we deal with a betrayal that goes deeper than any of us wanted to believe possible," she said. "And we do it carefully, because whoever's behind this has connections we don't fully understand yet, and a wrong move could compromise everything we've worked to uncover. This isn't just about catching one person. It's about understanding how far this actually reaches before we act." She looked at each of them in turn, and Naruto felt the full weight of what she was asking settle onto his shoulders alongside everything else the last several weeks had already placed there. "Can the three of you do this?" she asked. "Watch someone you may have trusted, may have worked alongside, without letting your feelings compromise the investigation?" Naruto thought about the file sitting on Tsunade's desk, about the name written across the top of it, about everything that name had meant to him for years before tonight. "Yes," he said, and his voice came out steadier than he expected, though something in his chest felt like it had gone permanently colder in the process of saying it. "We can do it." They left the tower well past midnight, the village quiet and dark around them, and for a long while, none of them spoke, the weight of the evening settling into a silence that felt different from any they'd shared before, not the tense, uncertain silence of the early days, not even the exhausted, hard-won quiet after the mission that nearly cost Sakura her life. Something heavier, something that felt, for the first time, like genuine grief for a trust that hadn't even been formally broken yet, only suspected. "I don't want to believe it," Sakura said finally, breaking the silence as they walked, her voice small in a way Naruto rarely heard from her. "None of us do," Sasuke said. "But the pattern's there," Naruto said quietly. "We can't just look away from it because we don't like what it means." "I know that," Sakura said. "Doesn't make it easier." They walked in silence for a while longer, and Naruto found his thoughts circling back, again and again, to the file on Tsunade's desk, to the mission history it documented, to the years of service it represented, to the sheer, gutting difficulty of reconciling everything he thought he knew about this person with what the evidence was suggesting they might actually be. "Whatever we find," Naruto said finally, as they reached the point where their paths would diverge for the night, "we do this right. No assumptions. No jumping to conclusions before we have real proof. If we're wrong, I don't want to have destroyed someone's life and reputation because we let paranoia get ahead of the facts." "And if we're right?" Sasuke asked. Naruto was quiet for a moment, the weight of the question settling over him in the dark, empty street. "Then we do whatever Tsunade needs us to do," he said. "Even if it's the hardest thing any of us have ever had to do in this squad." The following days took on a strange, unsettling texture, Squad Row maintaining the appearance of normal duty rotation while quietly, carefully, beginning the surveillance Tsunade had authorized, watching movements, tracking patterns, waiting for the kind of confirmation that would either validate their worst fears or, hopefully, prove them wrong. Naruto found the waiting almost unbearable in a way that no physical mission had prepared him for. There was no clean tactical objective here, no formation to call, no enemy to fight directly, just the slow, grinding patience of watching someone he'd once trusted, cataloging every meeting, every unexplained absence, every small detail that might or might not mean anything at all. On the fourth night of surveillance, watching from a rooftop overlooking a quiet section of the village where their suspect had made an unscheduled, unexplained trip well after the hour any legitimate business would call for it, Naruto felt Sasuke go very still beside him. There Sasuke breathed, barely audible, nodding toward a shadowed alley where their suspect had just met with a figure either of them recognized, someone clearly not a Konoha shinobi, someone whose posture and bearing carried the same disciplined, unnervingly professional quality Naruto remembered all too well from the fight in that command building weeks earlier. Sakura, positioned on the opposite rooftop with a clear line of sight to the exchange, signaled silently, confirmation, unmistakable, the two figures below exchanging something small and dark, the kind of hurried, wordless transaction that told its own story without either party needing to speak. Naruto felt something cold and final settle into his chest, watching it happen, watching weeks of careful investigation collapse into a single, undeniable moment of proof. It was real. The betrayal Tsunade had feared, the thread that connected every failed mission, every ambush that shouldn't have been possible, every piece of compromised intelligence stretching back 8 months. It was real, and it was happening right in front of them, confirmed beyond any possible doubt. "We have it," Sasuke said quietly, and there was no satisfaction in his voice, only the same heavy, grim certainty Naruto felt settling over his own chest. "We need to report this to Tsunade immediately." Naruto nodded, still processing the reality of what he'd just witnessed, the weight of confirming something he desperately hoped might turn out to be a mistake, a coincidence, anything other than what it so clearly was. "Sakura," he signaled, And she nodded from her position across the rooftops, already moving to fall in beside them, the three of them slipping away from the surveillance point in careful, practiced silence. The confirmation they'd been sent to find now weighing heavier in Naruto's chest than any physical burden he'd carried on any mission so far. Because now came the hardest part. Now came the moment where confirmation turned into consequence, where the name on that file stopped being a suspicion and started being something Squad Row would have to help bring to justice, regardless of how much history, how much complicated personal weight, stood behind it.